Child Development 205, Chapter 8, Autism Spectrum Disorders. Yay. A lot of times, this is exactly what draws people to this class. Autism has so many like different questions that come from as we learn this, or as we meet people, or we're having more people in society, or now we're extending diagnoses to like, adults. People usually come to this class for, oh, I'm curious about autism. So welcome. Welcome. So again, we were just chatting before we started the lecture about what our experiences are and what we know about him. Before we jump in, just keep in mind, up to now, we've learned everything about neurodiversity and how people are different, and how no matter what category you're under, people are not the same. And the same goes here. Autism itself, we are still learning about it. I mean, I don't like to say it's new. It's not. But our evolution of what we've learned about it has changed immensely, and it's still changing. And so our societies just still kind of get used to some of the things that used to be so outlier behaviors, and now we are seeing more people like this, or we're noticing things like this. It's just that we've come a long way, and we have a long way to go. So welcome. Any 2 cents you want to start off with, Professor Fernandez?
No, I'm excited. I was excited to read this chapter. My little background is that when I started school a billion years ago, the one thing I said I wouldn't work with is behavior. I hated it. I thought it was an uphill battle, and there's nothing. So I did my master's dissertation or thesis in social development in children with Down syndrome. And I thought I would just stay in that population. Well, little did I know that Down syndrome people have behaviors, just as I have behaviors, just as people, like everybody has behaviors. And so I found it wasn't the person, it is life. And so that's when I went back and got my BCBA, and then fell in love with the autism population. Just eat it up. It just is like opening up a Christmas gift for every new person I meet. There is no two people that are the same, just like every human in the world. And so I loved that chapter reflected that over and over and over again. Like, you're going to go in with all these preconceived notions because they have this diagnosis. And then you're surprised that nonverbal becomes verbal, or that they had no desire to talk to me, and they're coming up to me and telling me they want to swing. Like, it's just the humanness of this population far exceeds any definition that we can give them.
And I agree. I think behavior, again, I don't have nearly the experience that you have, but my few years in ABA and as ABA supervisor, it just was like, it was like this whole thing like unlocked for him, for like behaviorism was like, yeah, I knew about Skinner and I knew about all these different theorists, but this thing like put everything together. It was like, we all work off of behavior, and guess what? None of our behavior is predictable. But again, there's this humanistic piece to the people that we are serving, but us as I guess, for lack of a better word, servants, meaning like we want to categorize, and we want an answer, and we want it to be clean, and we want it to be, oh, well, this child has autism. Let's move on. But again, they grow, they develop, they surprise you. Don't ever underestimate people, especially in any population, but in
this
autism,
population specifically.
Oh my God.
They
will come out as sideways, and you never saw it coming. You're like,
right.
Oh,
right.
Cool.
Like a kid will just shut and open the door all darn day, and then all of a sudden you do something over here and they're done shutting the door, and you're like, what happened? What in the world changed this so magically? Like, the excitement is every single day I'm overwhelmed by them.
And how it to me, behavior in itself, how behavior makes sense to that person in that moment.
Yes.
Oh, it never makes sense to us.
Right.
Because it's their experience. We're just trying to step into that world.
Right.
It's really there's like that underlying phrase that you may hear now and again. It's like, it's really easier for us to step into their world than it is for them to step into our world.
Absolutely. And the expectation is that we do. Or
Yeah.
that is my expectation. And I do think that I do like to preface it in all of the population. I think that, they oftentimes get a bad rap. Like, and this chapter said that, especially when they talked about the moms not attaching to the children. And I just wanted to just start crying. They lack a sense of emotional connection. And that is, I think, just the opposite.
Right.
I think if anything, they are more emotionally connected. What is different about the total of this population is that they pair differently. So they're not emotionally connected to the person they're walking down the street, walking the dog. They could care less to say hi to that person. But if you are in their paired network, their devotion to you is deathly. They say hi to you and make eye contact every single time. It's not a skill you ever had to teach.
Right.
So I think that when you say that we're new, I think those are the things we're new at, is that the research has done some things really great and other things are just inaccurate, 100% inaccurate. I have never worked with a child with autism who hasn't hugged me, who hasn't communicated effectively and looked at me, who hasn't looked at me when I'm having a bad day and noticed.
Right.
So their lack of connectivity is it's inaccurate. It's just inaccurate.
Right.
Their lack of pairing, I would say, they don't want to pair to the grocery store worker.
No, they don't want to. They don't want to. They don't want to be there. It's just overwhelming. It sounds like
Right.
It's like a thing. No, I agree. And I sat my husband down and we watched the Temple Grandin movie. Like
on HBO, it's great.
Very great. But again, she was like decades ago, and she's still relevant. But back in the 50s, they call it undifferentiated childhood schizophrenia.
Yes.
And we know so much different. And in that particular, biopic or whatever, the mom, she was like, we never connected and we never this, but at the same time, Temple Grandin was just like processing everything, and all the connections were there. They just weren't physical connections to others.
And I have a theory behind that, because if you meet this is my own little Alicia theory, which I'd like to research, but if you read a mom whose first child is autistic,
yes,
there's a connection there, versus moms whose second, third, fourth, fifth child.
That would be a really cool research.
And I think that that's very different. I think there's a huge difference. And Temple Grandin was her fourth or fifth child.
I don't know.
So mom's bias of connectivity could almost be defined differently than if it had just been Temple and working straight off of Temple. If you've ever worked with families, there's always a difference in the first versus the third.
Yes. Oh yeah. I'm a third.
Yeah. Or the second or the fourth or something. But
no, I'm a third, but I have a first, I have a one, I have a single. And that's another thing too, because a lot of times they don't pair, or you have the ones who overpair.
Right. But the pairing is strong. It's just, I think sometimes the parents think that the kids are supposed to be this way. And they're not. They're this way.
Right. So if I had other children, I would be comparing them to Peyton versus comparing Peyton to other children.
Exactly.
I have a number of girlfriends who are firstborns, or are my only child. We're different, either on the spectrum or had physical disability and somewhere ID or anything like that. And we all agreed, yeah, better get the first one out of the way, because the rest of them. Even my therapist was like, "Yeah, I didn't know my firstborn until my secondborn, and they started acting the same, but they were 4 years apart." She's like, "I did not know until that happened." I was like, and again, I would love to say every day is predictable, because I think as humans, we try to go for the easy, predictable. Nope. This is not that job. This is not that career.
Do you notice a difference with like the middle child if they're autistic?
I think it's the first one that's always different in terms of pairing from the mom and the dad to the child. The first one, if there's good, strong pairing between the mom and dad in the first, the second, third, and fourth are strong. If the child that's autistic comes after the first child, the pairing tends to be weak, whether it's the second, third, fourth, or fifth.
Different. No, I would agree. Yeah. And again, we don't have research at this moment, but I would agree. I mean, anecdotally, I've seen, like, because the mom is there trying to like connect the way she connected with others, and now it's like,
The
Wait,
mom has her own set of behaviors, just as the child does. The mom needs to have a baby, not needs to, prefers a baby who nurses.
Right.
Many autistic children do not nurse. You struggle through that experience the whole entire time. This mother struggles to stick her boob into this baby's mouth, and it becomes adversarial. So then we have aversion to feeding. We have it starts there. It just starts there. Now, if mom has never breastfed before, she doesn't know what to expect. So she's always compensating. She's always going to the lactation specialist. She's always like, what am I doing? What am I doing? She's always modifying her behavior for this child. Now, if this is a second child, she's done it. What's wrong with you? Not that that's what she's saying.
No, but if there's it's just like again, we as humans, we naturally compare.
Correct.
Now, guess what? There are families with more than one child on the spectrum.
Oh, that's all. Yes, that's yes. And those people are just trying to survive, truly and honestly.
I worked with one with one family, Vietnamese family, and there was a lot of cultural, saturation there. But their oldest one was on the spectrum, but at a different part of the spectrum. But my client was double cochlear implants and, no functional communication and, and there was a lot there. And so I would work with one and then see the other one and then see how it was really, really interesting. And so there's no predictive value, but you might start to see trends of certain things that show up. Sometimes you'll see twins and either both have it or just one. And you're like,
yes. Our book talked about that.
Oh yeah.
It's the personal story. Yeah.
So again, autism spectrum disorder. I remember when it was coming up, maybe about 10 years ago, the misnomers, the misunderstanding, people were calling it a mental illness. It is a developmental disorder. It's not a mental illness. There's nothing mood related. You may see behaviors that look mood related, but this is not a variation in mood. This is a variation in social interactions and communication skills. It's almost the stuff that is invisible that we all take for granted is where the big gap in autism is.
Right.
And it's almost, in a way, this is almost like human universal design for learning, meaning like if we all understood behaviorism and communication and what pragmatics is, with the invisible rules of if we all learned that, like as a universe, like all first graders learn that, or all third graders learn that, they would just say, okay, well, my friend over here just has a difference in communication, or my friend over here is maybe uncomfortable in group settings. So we could start to, and this is my hope, is that we start to trickle down as you guys are working with youngsters and we start even talking with the 4-year-olds. Well, this is a neurodiverse community and this person might not be having a good day today because the wind kicked up, right? And so the behavior, you might see different behaviors because of so the language that we can start to share, the culture that we can shift from the bottom up, like we're trickling it down from community colleges down. And then you guys are helping the kids learn the language on the way up. And it's like, we're like re-sandwiching society together. And that's why I do this work. That's why I stopped doing one-on-one work. Because I was like, because I started training in ABA and I was like, but I'm training one at a time or maybe 3 at a time, but like, how could I get 30? So again, we use person first language, except for in the discussion board, I kind of poked that bear a little bit. Sometimes people in this category switch the person first language as a language of empowerment. They don't say as kids get older, right? We need to always use our person first language, but you'll see as adults start saying, I'm not a person with autism, I'm an autistic. Now in the UK, they call it an autistic, right? And that's different, that's fine. But sometimes people take these words that they have at their own and they use it as empowerment. It's like me saying, like, I'm a woman, in some other places that's going to be like, oh, don't ever call yourself a woman. Like, that's terrible. Like, but like there's people who take words as empowerment, like the word queer, that used to be people calling other people queer. And now the entire community is like, hey, this is a queer community, love it or leave it. So again, you're going to see as children and go into adulthood, they start to select their words. How do I define myself? And so I did put that on the discussion board to kind of like flip it on the script. And by the way, I changed that last semester because of a student. And she said, yeah, she didn't have autism, but she had some other stuff going on. And she goes, I don't use person first language to just define my stuff, and I use it as a form of empowerment. How about other people? And I was like, you know what, you're right. Let's. She brought it up at some point. And I think we were talking about person first language, and she's like, no, I think that's what I said. Okay, but as we evolve, let's put it over here. And it was, I think it's good. That's a good one. So
If-
keep in mind, it's social differences. It's not social. It's not bad. It's just different. And sometimes it's disabling. It depends, like how, again, if it's mild, mild, severe, in certain areas, it might be totally fine, but in other areas are unraveling. So again, same thing with any disorder that we talked about. Anytime you see here on the lecture, I put the equals, define that for yourself. But here IDEA says it's a developmental disability significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication. So again, I have a child with autism who's hyperverbal, but he cannot read faces. Still, I mean, like, he's getting better, but I wouldn't even give him a 50-50. I can literally go like this. What is my face doing? He goes, are you gonna sneeze? It's just not a skill. He's still learning it, and he's still struggling with developing peer relationships, wondering what, like, when he's like trying to show it, let's say, we've done all the homework, we've had the dinner and everything, and then he was like, hey, oh, daddy, I want to show you this, daddy, it's like, okay, show me. And then there's this point where we have to say, hey, buddy, I need to focus over here, or I'm on the phone right here, or I'm in the toilet, leave me alone. So sometimes we have to put in these really harsh boundaries, and he still doesn't get it. So again, it looks different on everybody. I've worked with kids who are not verbal, like nonverbal will probably never form a functional piece of communication. Again, it looks very, very different. It says, here's the thing. Keep in mind, with every single category, every single chapter that we talk about that has a disability, it only has to do with the functioning happening in school. If a child is managing okay in school, and maybe they're a little bit of a loner, but not really bad, but like, if their behavior is not concerning, if they're not, maybe like last chapter, ADHD, kicking over a chair, or they're not yelling at the teacher, they're not fighting on the playground, they're not failing their classes, they may get missed. Girls with autism get missed, and we'll talk about that again. So again, it's IDEA says if autism is affecting their educational performance, we'll support it. If autism is affecting their ability to make their bed at home, we're not supporting that. We have to remember that autism could be very, 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 very successful in school. Just remember, people with autism can be very, very, very successful. Elon Musk has self-disclosed that he has Asperger's. So high functioning, yes, but I guarantee you he's got a lot of people that keep him on track.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, APA, the DSM manual here really breaks it down, because now we're talking about medical intervention and billing and things like that. So they will break it down and talk about deficits in social communication, restricted repetitive patterns of behavior. That's where we see the flapping. Mine, when excited, still barks. So that's, yeah. A 14-year-old that barks is more peculiar for him. He's starting to now do it because he gets overloaded, and then he's starting to feel bad about it, which is like, before he would just do it and not care. Now you're like, oh, all right. So he's developing emotionally. He can be reflexive, but what that does is it makes a real sad teenager. Yeah, he's feeling, I just want to be like everybody else, but then I'm really cool because I'm weird. It's hard. Also, symptoms must be present in the early developmental period. Now, again, typical autism is usually just diagnosed by a doctor around age 3. Yeah, by the age of 3. Yeah. And then if it's something a little bit different, and you can have a later in life diagnosis. Peyton got his at 8. So his is atypical high functioning autism. That's what they call it, which is not really a diagnosis. It's not really a thing. It just gives people a way to identify, maybe he has some stuff that we need to keep an eye on, right? Again, if there's an intellectual disability, this is a little bit of an argument here. Sometimes, again, this is DSM says if there's an intellectual disability like low IQ, then they'll say it's it's intellectual disability, which I believe that both of those things can exist at the same time. However, just depends on where you're at, right? If you're at the doctor's office and they're saying no ID, they may step back and say developmentally delayed. which is kind of in between ID and so again, language kind of matters only when you're looking at supports, again, not in the humanistic value of a person. And then again, they want to also rule out things like if there's a brain tumor, or if there's something that looks like Fragile X syndrome could look similar in behaviors, but it's not autism. So autism itself, again, as IDEA defines it, is developmental disability that affects educational performance. DSM says, okay, there's all these bunch of different things, but it could be X, Y, and Z. So let's look at that first, and we'd rather call it that first. So as we talk about prevalence, we'll talk about why autism numbers have changed. A lot of times it's because of all these definitions. Look at these three different definitions. Head Starts just doesn't, they're not saying we're even diagnosing. They're saying a child is classified. They just put it right out there. We don't diagnose, we classify.
Professor Laney.
Yeah, jump in.
Can you push up your slide?
Push.
It's not showing the PowerPoint. It's on the title page.
Oh, it's on the title page. I'm like, you know what? Let me see if I can do a new share. Let me do it.
Oh, there we go. We got definitions.
Okay, so sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Here, but sorry. Okay, so going back to here, the ASD here for IDEA says developmental disability affecting school. DSM says, look at all these different guys here, right? DSM really wants to kind of like click, 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 but at the same time, at the bottom, they say here, let's try to figure out what else it could be, right? Because we don't want to say it's autism if it's something else. And then over here, Head Start says we're classifying a child as if these two other people noticed something. Same thing, ASD from CDC says it's a developmental disability, and ASD from Autism Speaks, which is like one of the largest nonprofit agencies for them. And both it says right here, ASD and both autism are both general, they're stepping back. General terms for a group of complex disorders of brain development. That is the nicest way of saying that. They just said, hey, all brains are different. Autism represents a very complex part of that differences. These disorders are characterized in varying degrees by difficulty in social interaction, verbal and nonverbal communication, and repetitive behavior. So it's basically the DSM definition really summarized. Good? Did we catch up?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. Anything else you want to jump in?
Nope.
These are the definitions, yeah.
No, I hover around the DSM. It's the strongest. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more specific.
Mhm.
But again, you have to have the doctor state that one, and then then the parents agree that information can come to the school, and then that can go into the school chart, and then the categorical designation happens.
Mhm.
Right? But there are parents who can say no. Right? You might have parents who full well know that this child was diagnosed X, Y, and Z with the doctor, but they will not share that information.
Correct.
Yeah. So
or you can have parents that will take the educational diagnosis for services, but won't go see the doctor.
And then there's moms like me who, when we'll talk about EBD next week. I said, look at the school gave him EBD. What do you think about this? I said that to the autism specialist. She goes, I don't think anything about that because that's not a medical diagnosis. I said, right. Good answer. So you'll see some of these other terms again. And again, there is a piece here where people do use autistic as an empowerment tool, but let that person define themselves that way. We stay with a person first language until otherwise, right? And again, neurodiverse, and I would say neuroatypical is really, but that doesn't roll off the tongue. So no, I don't really say my son is neuroatypical or I work with neuroatypical. I just say I work with a group of diverse, or I might say autism and related disorders. How would you describe it? Like an elevator pitch?
We use the word neurodiversity a lot.
Yeah, but not neurotypical or neuroatypical.
If I'm trying to differentiate two, like if a mom will tell me their child's she wants them in a gen ed classroom. So I would say like neurotypical, neuroatypical. I would use that word. Then only to distinguish.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad it's at the bottom of the list, because
as opposed to like a lot of parents will say normal. You want to get away from those words. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, because what is it's normal?
Right.
yeah, I'm still searching for that day. I haven't had one like ever. And again, just like every chapter, there's mild, moderate, severe forms of anything, and those deficits might look like one area of life, or some area of life, or all area of life. They may need some supports, moderate supports, lifetime supports. So again, everybody's really different, and you know what? Sometimes things progress or things get better. Early intervention can mitigate what autism looks like over a lifetime. Do you have any statistics on that, or any like anecdotal pieces on that?
Well, what is it? I think it's 14% of the level 3s go to level 2s. I mean, so you're taking kids that are nonverbal, that are sensory, they're the ones that are stemming and flapping. You're putting them into a level 2, which gives them language. Like that level has language. You may not have like reciprocity, but you have language. I think that's like, it's not a huge amount, but it's a big amount. Now, going from level 2 to level 1, I think is very high. I think the last numbers I saw were at least in the 30%.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it's good. It's early intervention changes so much.
Right. So
much.
This is what I heard, and I don't know if this statistic is actually true. It said if early intervention can happen before the age of 3, you can almost mitigate 10 years of struggles. And I don't know how you exactly measure that, but having a child who got intervention at 5 versus age of 3, you're gonna, that 2-year gap can create a 10-year difference.
And you can see it when you're working with them, like especially you get like if you get a 14-month-old versus a 24-month-old, those few months in terms of language development, you skyrocket versus somebody coming in at 4. I mean, you've changed the world. It's huge. It's huge.
And their brain, and again, it can also, their environment has so much to do with it. We're assuming that families don't have the full scope of like a stimulating environment and like a educational, all these opportunities for them. So when they come into a program, they have all these different pieces of interactions and opportunities that they make their brain just explode. If they're just a kid sitting at home with an iPad, that's not it. So again, early intervention is key. And I can tell you, being like of a certain age, you never get the time back.
That's what we're seeing in our class with the kid who has autism. Just in the few months, like when I was talking about earlier, or like the other week, the few months that his mom started realizing that even if she's not accepting the full like scale, he like this week has sat for group time. He's talking. He knows all his shapes, all his number, like all his call. All of a sudden, it's just like this whole new thing. Yeah.
It's coming together. It's making sense.
Yeah. And like,
and again, you don't need the parents to know everything that you know. They don't have to take this class. They don't have to be fully on board. They can be totally confused, but if they're on your team, that's all you need for now. Right. And so here's something to think about. People and children, adults and children, us too, we don't ask questions of things that we can't really conceive of. Meaning, if we're not ready to know it, how do we know which questions to ask in order to know it? Right. So for the parents, it's a journey, right? It's shoots and ladders, man. Trust me. Like you go, bah, 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 and then you're just like, it's this weird journey. And then, sometimes they're not ready to ask those questions or ready to understand that information or process it or accept it. And then as they go through, they'll be like, hey, so my doctor said something about, I'll go back one. My doctor said something about, childhood disintegrative disorder. And you're like, oh, that's really interesting because that's an outdated term. We don't really use that. So, I mean, if they bring it to you, then you can have the conversation. You can't sit there and go, you need to know this stuff and you need to accept your child. Like, let that process happen. Just as that child is blossoming, you're going to see it in the parent. Even if she's going through the motions, she's going to get there someday. That's a beautiful thing to see too, where the parent is like it's cool. Right. And here, these are some terms that we don't really hear a lot either. A splinter skills are somebody like, like a functioning skill that is so advanced. And this video talks about autistic savants. It's like the people who can count cards, the people who can calculate pi to 10,000 digits. It's people who can do art, so amazing. And you're just like, wow, you just, like I think that talks about the one in there. They get into a helicopter and they go over a city for 20 minutes. And then over the next 3 days, they're hand drawing this entire skyline. from a 20-minute helicopter ride. That is a splinter skill. His sister also said, yeah, he forgets to shower. So that's what I'm here for, like, and usually we don't even quite say savant anymore. That's kind of an outdated term. Savant was our way of saying they're so, they're like a prodigy. They're so advanced. We would say what, high functioning, maybe a person with Asperger's. It kind of depends. I think
I would say at young ages, I would say like hyperlexic. Until they have an IQ, you would say like hyperlexic. You would just use those kinds of words.
What it looks like.
Yes.
You would say very good at art. They
Yes.
have an exceptional amount of skills
Yes.
in fine motor dexterity or
Right.
kicking a ball or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, splinter skills and autistic savants. Yeah, that's not till they talk about adults, really.
I did like, though, I have to say, so when you're doing assessments in the world of autism, I love that they use the word splinter skills, because when you're doing assessments, you're looking for, so they'll show on a question and answer. I wanted to show like the DAYC is a typical one you would use. And when you're doing it, you want to show continuity down the line. And then typically a child that is autistic has a splinter skill, which means there isn't continuity. So there's a break and then it starts again. So you would do like, does it? Yes, yes, yes. Oh, does he engage with peers? No. And then does he know his alphabet? Yes, yes, yes. Does he initiate interaction? No. And then you keep going. That's a splinter. That's very odd. So like if you were to test a neurotypical child, they would have yeses all the way until their age, versus somebody with autism, they would have splinter because they're going to get those no's when it comes to communication or social. And so that I thought was neat that they identified that. I use that a lot because you can't use that. If I were to use that word in an assessment for a child with Down syndrome, it wouldn't fly. But if you were to say a child has splinter skills, automatically your colleagues know you're talking about a certain population.
Right. So my son's always he's been developmentally delayed as well. A lot of his motor planning, fine motor, gross motor, off. But before the age of 2, he didn't walk. He walked a little bit late, but around the time that he was walking, maybe around right after, maybe about 1.5. We're sitting in front of the TV. I'm folding laundry, and I kind of like nod off a little bit. That happened, I think, 2 times. And one time he had a Phillips head screwdriver and he was taking a bolt out of a window.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, he's not even 2.
Right. All right.
What the heck? And then the next time he found a smaller Phillips and took apart his wheels on the bus guy, the little play school one.
Right.
He took apart, had the servo out, like the ribbon of all the like rainbow. And I'm okay with getting that stuff back together. That one scared me. And so again, fast forward to 14 years later, he took apart a Bluetooth speaker, an RC car, and LED lights. And so now he has LED lights on an RC car with a Bluetooth speaker hookup in there. And so it's on his RC car. So he has 2 different battery types. And literally the therapists at the houses are like, what? And I said, he had that.
Yeah, it's good.
I can't teach that. You can't teach that. That is a splinter skill. This kid can dissect anything. And that's kind of it's only problematic in the fact that, when you buy stuff and it comes to the house, it comes to die. And he even said, Mommy, take a video of this. And I said, he hadn't earned it. And I was like, I'll take a video later. He said, hurry now before I break it.
No.
Before I take it apart. It's like, dude, that's all up to you. I mean, like we have, doom boxes of just parts. And we have Legos, and then we have doom boxes of proximity sensors and servos and smokers. And so or he'll tell me, hey, did you know like a lithium battery smokes when you poke a hole in it?
Okay, let's not do that.
He was 9.
Yeah.
He runs out to the front porch and I see like this plume of smoke, the little tiny watch batteries. If you a plume of smoke comes out of it. I was like, again, this is my house. And then I was like, oh, do I have fire extinguishers? Are those expired? Like there's this thing where you're just like, oh, wow, I thought we were saying. So again, you don't know what the day looks like. You don't know.
But typically when you use the word splinter, you're talking about the ASD population.
Yeah, you wouldn't hear that in emotional or low vision or blindness. I like this. I
love this chart.
Yeah, this is cool because to me, everybody again is here.
I wanted to copy this and put it on an assessment. I think it's a great visual for parents.
I almost feel like we need an app.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
right?
Yeah.
Because, right, so gifted versus ID, right in the middle, that's most of us, right? Social interaction. I'm gonna go ahead and say the full moon's making me a little edgy, so I'm gonna go down. I had a migraine today, so I'm like way down. Um, and then verbal communication, are they lexic, hyperlexic, or like non-verbal, right?
Correct.
Right. So this kid, average IQ, that's kind of high for friendships. Like if this was an actual person with autism, behaviors, intense behaviors, you're going to see. And when we say behaviors, what is that? This one says unusual behaviors like hand flapping.
Right.
Right. You guys know what that means, right? It's a lot of this, or maybe flicking, or one hand, or
Toe walking, jumping, yay! These kinds of things.
anything. Mine barks. So
Yeah.
that's kind of fun. Sensory. I like that there was 2 on sensory. Because kids can over register sensory information or under register in sensory information. That was cool to learn that. So like, have you guys ever like, and I don't know if this is just me, probably I do have like some motor planning issues. You'll walk by a desk, clip your hip or your leg or something like that, and you're like, oh, that's gonna hurt, that's gonna cause a bruise. 3 days later you totally don't even remember you did it, but you're like, oh, where'd that bruise come from? That's a good one. That's like, wow, that's like 4 colors right there. That means you under register, you hit it. And at the time you're like, yeah, that was a good one. But it didn't like, you didn't fall over, you weren't crying, you weren't like falling apart. Kids could just do a normal bump on something and an over like tidal wave register that information and hit the deck and have just a full on meltdown. What happened? I still, Peyton, I ran into the door. I'm like, well, what part of the door? He's like, well, the outside of the door frame. Like he saw his motor planning issues. He'll see an open door and he kind of like doesn't center himself. And like, yeah, he'll be like, I hit my head on a door. I'm like, how did you do that? He's like, well, I was looking down and then I like looked up at the last minute and like, I'm like, okay. So and then for him, like the tiniest of a paper cut is like,
it hurts.
I mean, it's like this tidal wave, right? We ran into some somatic issues this week. He had a rough day, and then the next day he felt his stomach hurt a lot. I was like, oh, he's like, he had to write an apology letter and kind of like face some music, and his stomach started hurting, and I was like, oh, like I told him, I said, he said he was feeling bad about what he had done the day previous. I said, your heart and your tummy are a little connected today. And sometimes that happens to, that's very neurotypical. You're going to have a regular kid have that too. But now you could have a kid who's they could be bleeding and not even know. So they're under registering this sort of pain or a bright light. And for us, you and I, we kind of like shrug it off. They lose it. So again, you kind of don't know. Some kids are totally okay with the sights and the sounds. In fact, they love it. But then when it comes to smell, they unhinge, or vice versa. You're like, don't you smell that? It's burning. And they're like, no. But if there's a flash of light, they like retreat into oblivion. And so you have to kind of know that about the kiddos. And again, knowing that only means that you have an 80% guideline of what it could be, but then the next day could be something different. So I like that there was 2, right? There was 2 things. And then motor, coordinated. Gross motor fine score. Yeah, I had the kid who ran windmill, like he ran until he was about 8. And so it was like, okay, he's just getting it all figured out, coordinated, getting it all figured out. And then I know a lot of adults who are super awkward. Yeah, my husband said if they could make clothes out of bubble wrap, that would be something we would invest in, because just like my motor planning is not that great either. I also have a friend her fine motor skills. She's like, I can't help my kid with Legos. I can't do it. She's like, my fingers do not do those things. It's like, oh yeah. So again, if we all look at ourselves on here, it's like, yeah. And again, putting us all together on this kind of evens the playing field. It really looks at neurodiversity differently. I really like that one. App is cool though. Characteristics, again, I like this, the social emotional reciprocity. It's interesting. I feel like Alicia said, like kids with autism can understand emotions. They might understand them more like flashcards, right? They might not be able to read your face, but they see a smiley face like emoji and they're like, smile face, happy, right? Right. But if you're saying, how does your friend feel right now? No. But again, little kids don't, that perspective taking is not really going to show up with little ones. But as they grow, that, but again, that the same thing with nonverbal social communication. I'm again really pleased that I have a kid who's in a very structured program. And part of that program, and I was talking, even in a social situation at his school, I said, listen, that kid didn't want to talk to you because his feet were pointing the other way. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, look at your feet. Your feet are pointing towards me right now. Do you want to talk to me? Yeah. What if you didn't want to talk to me? He's like, why'd walk over there? Well, that kid was starting to walk over there. So the nonverbal communication, you and I have to like define it, outline it, give them example. It's this really interesting thing. Sometimes they just have it. Sometimes they have it with certain people and not with certain people. It's interesting. You'll see differences, these subtle little differences, like everything's that little slider scale. And then same thing with interpersonal relationships. You might have a person with autism will say, yeah, I have friends, you know, or the young child, oh, I have friends because I go to school. You and I are like, that's not exactly your friend. They don't understand always the distinction between the different types of friendships, or how to create a friend or what a friend looks like. They just know that there's people there and those are my friends or those are not my friends. Right? It might be very simple, maybe black and white. But again, we are social creatures. We can't exist in a bubble. We don't exist alone. All people need support. And at the same time, we learn from others. We learn from others. This least restrictive environment, entire piece of IDEA, so you can learn with typically developed peers. So Alicia, in your program, do you have neurotypicals? Like you said, you had your kids in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Cool.
Not much of it. They're all human.
Love it.
One day at a time with every single human.
I love it. And really, if you think about it, going back when, if you think about it, communication can be funky. You know, we all have differences in communication, not our own, culturally, or like it is saturated in our gender, or how we're talking on certain days, or if we're feeling a certain way and we talk a certain way. And there's a lot to figure out. I mean, if your deficits of your person are in social, the like life, like the regular life, that's hard because life is funky to begin with. And then if they're almost like, and all those things are I can't even.
It's I loved how I think Cece, when you started like understanding, when you asked the question about communication, I think that that's where it all kind of comes to, for me, this isn't research. It all kind of comes together for me. When I was in my class, they talked about the difference between like, so I was a teacher. And so I would have speech therapists come in and do speech therapy with my kid. And I was under the assumption they were saying, okay, this is a phone. So teach the child that this is a phone. And the child would say phone. Okay, so now we have, and then they're going to fix it if F comes out, own or whatever, right? And then I go to my behavior program, or I go to behavior, and I learned that there's a whole different side of communication that the speech therapists that I keep sending these kids to learn how to talk are not addressing. And that's this part that makes communication so undefinable. And it's the part that, okay, so if you teach this kid that this is a phone and he's got the word for phone, is he telling you what it is, or does he want it? Or is he telling you that he's hurt and has to make a phone call? Or is he saying, call my mom because I'm scared? Like there were so many different ways to say phone means that one thing, but all the speech therapist is teaching them is phone. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you just changed. Right. So in terms of communication, that one word has so many meanings. So as the behaviorist now, you go in and try to figure out what that meaning is for that word. So that's what you're trying to define, I think, Professor. And then Cece asked the most astute question is you are trying to define communication. Wow. And tell me, let's start with the phone. Let's go. You tell me. And then you start. Right. Is it what you want? Is it what it is? Do you want to make a phone call? Let's just go. And that's communication.
It is a symbol. Everything is a symbol. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like, again, so it's not, so now that they've like labeled it, great. Now what? Now, are you just like, that is a phone and it is a square that everybody just holds? No, there's a value to it and a function to it.
Right.
There's so many different
Yep.
So same thing with the smiles.
With everything. Everything
has value other than
TV. everything. So now you're trying to take that part and make a whole understanding and reciprocity. Like you've got to go into their world or you will never get communication ever. To just stand back as a speech therapist and say phone, candle, computer, you're lost. You're never going to get there.
The world is not about flashcards. It's like flashcards is the first step.
Right. So that's why I say when you say they lack, when the books describe them as lacking, they are not lacking. We do not speak their language. We do not understand that this is not meaningful to them. What is this word to them that makes it communicate reciprocity to me? And they never disappoint. If you get in there and get their language, you will figure that out.
And then this next piece is great too, because I've also done that too, where you're like, a small child will say phone and you go phone, very good. And then do you want this phone? And they say, want this phone?
Right. Echoic.
So now we're echoic. Now
right. Yes.
Kids have learned to just repeat what you're saying.
Right.
Because you're giving them the nod and you're giving the support and do you want this phone? They say, want this phone? You hand it to them and they just.
Right.
Right. Oh, I thought you wanted this phone. They said, wanted this phone.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so now you have this, oh my God, they're imitating. Here we go. Let's build on this next thing. Okay. So now you're imitating. Let's start with what you want. Food is always a great place. Who doesn't love to eat? So let's start with food. It's always a great motivator. Yeah. It's just, so I think your astute communication question is the crux of autism. If I could just, and I would think Skinner's life work was verbal behavior. So I'm just going off of his.
But also, work. I mean, just taking a step back, communication in general, even with neurotypicals, it's hard to decipher what if somebody says. If when somebody says, "How was your day?" and they go, "It was fine,"
that normally means it wasn't fine.
Or like, there's that whole conversation about like, dude, and like, dude. Right. So,
but the speech therapist that you keep sending your child or that you're working so hard to get, I need my 30 minutes of speech. They're doing your traditional, put your tongue over here and say this, and then receptive understanding. And they're still not getting in there to figure out what that communication component is. So it's very astute. It's always something to watch for.
Awesome. So again, you'll start to see these diagnostic criteria, these little pieces show up, like the echoic. The child's verbal, but they just repeat what they've heard, and so maybe there's a TV show on and they're just repeating it, and it is a foundation for education. So yes, you can build on that. The nonverbal and social communication, again, that's very challenging for a lot of children with autism, even children neurotypicals. As we move forward, when's the last time you guys got sat down? Were you guys sat down at like 7 or 8 and said, okay, we're going to learn about nonverbal communication? Yeah, come on. Did anybody do that for you? Nobody did that for me. We learn as we go, or guess what? We don't. And we get it wrong and we get confused. Have you ever been somewhere where you saw somebody walk by, like your best friend, you're like, hey, like, across the street, hey, Sarah, or whatever, like, and they totally ignored you. And you're like, oh my gosh, she must be mad at me. Another example, another reason could be she just didn't hear you, didn't see you. Right. And so we have this one read on it. They have a different read on it. And that's just how communication works. It's even more challenging with kids with that part of the brain that's just not as strong or needs to build those skills. And then interpersonal relationships. A lot of times, even in a neurotypical environment, you might see the loner, or like some things. I'm not saying that those children have like a diagnosable issue, but sometimes those are some, like, did we miss this? Sometimes things get missed because the kid is fitting in, especially kids who are mild or have like are very observant, or that's one of maybe their splinter skills is just it's called masking. A lot of kids who just do what the other kids are doing. I don't know what we're doing, but they're walking that way, so I'm walking this way. Yeah, it happens, right? And so again, some other things, other considerations, the ages, showing it early. It's like a lot of these features will show up 6 months, 8 months. What's the earliest that you've had like a
diagnosed? I think 14, and that's early. I think I've read 9 months, typically not the first in the family. There's a strong genetic component, as our book spoke to. You normally, if they're the fussy babies, those are the ones you want to watch for. The really, the colic, you can't get
Ones that
control over.
you can't
Yeah.
comfort them.
They don't sleep. They're not sucking. It's just everything.
Ugh.
It's just,
It's hard.
you're just, moms are feeling like failures.
It's hard.
Yes.
It's hard because breastfeeding is very sensory, and maybe that's a sensory overload for them, or dark is sensory overload for them, or light is sensory overload, sound is so there's a child who just is very challenging to comfort. Yeah, keep an eye on that. But other things like, and we'll talk about some of the signals, but like not responding to their name, not pointing. What are some of the other things that kind of gets you like, that's a maybe?
Oh, toe walkers. First thing I see, toe walkers.
Toe walkers a mile away, and I'm like,
toe walkers are huge. Any kind of stereopathies, like you'll see kids that'll just all of a sudden be sitting and moving their wrists like that, and you'll ask mom and dad, do they do that a lot? Very subtly, but you will notice. Not responding is a huge one. Play. They do not know how to play. They love wheels on a car. They'll just stare at the wheels, spin the wheels, but they will not drive the car, but just spin, spin, spin. Fans, staring at fans over and over and over, but have no desire to get in there and see the fan.
I had a who would be in a car, and from his perspective, other cars were doing this, right? And that would, any lateral movement would just, he would just be like, throwing a ball back and forth, he would just be like, any lateral movement, it was almost like the way his eyes read that. It was like,
it's interesting too, because children that turn their head and go flat like that, I always notice that too right away, like the lateral part of how they play and see, especially when they're standing up on a table. Or you'll see they'll lay on the floor a lot. Tone, they're always hunched over in their play. They have a really hard time with tummy control, sitting up straight and playing. W sitting when they play, and their play again is not typical play. It's rolling cars on a wheel, or flicking, or staring. Those are the kind of things.
Peyton's was like flicking the car over and playing with the wheels, but like if there was an on and off button, click, 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 and like just like tick, 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 tick. And then he noticed that Phillips had screwdriver was holding the batteries in, and then it was like, and you can see this thing where it was like, and I've seen kids buttons too, the same button, or even on a toy. Do you remember those ones that are like, it looks like a little table with
a
like
box,
or the ones with the pigs in it where you hammer it down? My nephew had a hammer in a very specific order, in a very specific number of hammers, and he was like 4. I was like, oh man, yeah. And it's
any rigidity, any sameness, opening and closing the doors, all of those sameness, all of that. Yes.
Oh yeah, it's really, really interesting. So again, we've kind of talked about this, the hyper responsive to sensory input, or hypo responsive to sensory input. Also swings, twirling.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Love them. Yeah. Love them. Yeah.
Like rolling around in grass, going, any sort of swing set, any sort of any
it's a vestibular movement. Yeah.
Any twirling, I've also worked with students or children who were like on a swing, and that's when they would calm down.
It's oftentimes
enough in where they weren't dysregulated. That was very regulating for them. And so again, it might be very dysregulating to one kid, but the other kid's like, no, I need lots of that.
Right.
I had a family I worked with who had a hammock in the house, and she was little, very early learner, nonverbal, very sweet. But she would just self-soothe in a little hammock. And her communication was a lot of pointing. She was good at matching, but she couldn't even say no, and her no was a bite. And so we had to like really work her out of saying no and finding something else that was and she ended up, it wasn't a no, it wasn't a point, it wasn't a head, it was that was it. That's how we got to know without biting. And that was it for her. That was it, because that's just where her brain was at. But it took a long time because she had no other way to communicate. So she bit. It was sweetest girl.
Is it like the same thing? We have a child, it's not diagnosed, but it is there. I just know that parents haven't fully went through with it yet. He looks at the clock And whenever it's the same number, like he'll say 444 and then got it. And then once it gets closer to 5, that's usually when his mom comes to pick him up. But like if she's late because of traffic, then instead of him going more of like the crying part, because he doesn't really cry anymore, he'll ask for a mask break outside and then try to wait for her. And that's like his way of like calming down, like, can I go? And sometimes we have to say, no, certain points because, too many parents walking in. And now it's dark outside because, we can't see it. But I think that's like his coping, mechanism. So it was, like no outburst.
Yes.
That you nailed a perfect thing there. Jump in. I'll let you. Go.
Anytime there is a prevalence to numbers, letters, and shapes, that's a huge indicator. The symbols are meaningful to them. There's never they're rigid, guys. An A is always an A. It never looks different. A 1 is always a 1. It never looks different, and you can't make it look different. And if you do make it look different, it's no longer a 1. So the rigidity in our numbers and letters are so concrete. Our shapes, they love them. That's how so that's always a huge sign too. Yes.
And that's part of the reason why I actually chose the origami for this one.
Okay, very good. Yeah, the shapes. Yes.
Origami is very rigid. Like you have to do it this way, it doesn't work out. And so I have worked with the origami as a replacement behavior.
It's great. That's great.
I have a theory that the child who had that like little bit of a freak out that one day, who we thought maybe the wind was an issue.
Yes.
I don't think it was the wind. I actually think, so he came to school earlier this week on Tuesday and was crying and like, having a meltdown kind of outside, wanted to go home. And I walked out there and kind of changed his mind by telling him we had new toys, but then also he was like, but is Miss Shannon there? She's my lead. And I said, yes. And he's like, okay, and went in and sat with her. And I think that she wasn't there. Was she there that week? I don't think she was there that week or something. She had been out a few weeks and stuff. And I think he didn't like when I was teaching because he's very, I like the schedule. We go at this time. Is it time to go? And I think he likes Miss Shannon there because she follows that strict schedule. And I wasn't doing that. We were just kind of free flowing when she wasn't there because just to make it easier on us or on the general ed kids. And I realized today, oh shoot, maybe it's like he doesn't like when I'm teacher because things are off. Things are,
That's
not
very astute. Very astute. You're probably right. Yeah.
Right. And this little guy doesn't really probably possess the skills at this time to say, I'm sorry, Miss Molly, I am uncomfortable with your teaching styles, method, and schedule, and I much prefer. They don't have the skill set to that. They just show you a behavior.
And he had asked like, oh, is it time to do this? And I was like, oh, we're not doing that, so it probably threw him off.
Yeah.
Poor guy. But we also, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say predictability, it's for them, it's comforting. They know what's happening next, but not all kids need that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was gonna ask, so the other child who is more, he does the flapping and stuff. He has a new thing of scuffing his shoes on the tile during like group time, which is really, really hard because it gets all the other kids distracted. And it's like, is there anything you can do? Like how, I know it's kind of like
shoes.
Put what?
Tape on his shoes.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Like duct tape or regular tape?
Any tape, masking tape.
Okay. Because I know like we don't want to stop him and it helps him just, it just helps.
The chirp is annoying and it's distracting.
But it's so distracting and we can't force him to, we don't want to like, so.
You want him to bounce. Yeah, just tape them up. Yeah, we use them a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's partially why I don't take my teenager to the mall. There's a lot of chirping. So prevalence, we all know prevalence is on the rise. And look at this. This is from 2016. I think the number is now more like 1 in 58. What do you have, Alicia?
No, I think it's 1 in 54 boys. Yeah. It's
right. And there's several reasons why. I mean, like awareness, right? You have some parents who are like ready to go for it, and some there's more diagnostic tests, there's more information out there, there's more research. So again, we used to lump a lot of the, before this category even existed, we would lump a lot of like all of these students into those hyper behaviors would go into ADD or ADHD. And then those ones that were kind of peculiar, they would say, oh, they're intellectually disabled, they have a low IQ, boom. Right. And so again, these numbers, I'm not saying that they're wrong. I also think there's a need for people like this in our society. There's a need. My son told me the other day, I'm going to be the CEO of a large company. I said, awesome. And you know why? I know he could probably do it because Elon Musk did it. You know, he didn't invent Tesla. He was hired as the CEO. Right? He did companies. He did like an earlier iteration of PayPal. He kind of invented PayPal. So I'm like, my kid's going to do something weird like that, hopefully, so I can retire in style. But again, the numbers that go up, that doesn't mean anything is, it's hard. I mean, a lot of people are like, it must be our water, it must be the toxins. You know what? There's 1,000 different reasons what it could be. There's 1,000, and there's still research to this very day to try to find a genetic link to it, find the mutated gene, find the part of the brain, find if there's lysine missing in the second week or the first trimester, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's research on this stuff, but the bottom line is it's not going away.
The numbers are high right now. Yes.
Yeah, numbers are high right now. And again, it may present, there's some trauma presentations from COVID that may look like autism that later get kind of like assessed out into other categories too. So we might see, excuse me, some of the numbers go down.
Right.
I haven't ever seen the numbers go down, but you know, we might.
What we are starting to see is some splintering, there's that word, between genders. We are starting to see that they are looking at differences. Those numbers that you're looking at are mainly boys, guys. They just are.
Yeah, it's 3 to 1, right? 4 to 1.
Yeah, 4 to 1. And the population for girls is growing. And so, and they present different. So like what you were saying, Professor, in terms of diagnostics, all of that, it's all around boys. Like girls are they talk. Girls look for social cues, but they're over talk. Like, so there's things that the boys aren't doing. And so we're seeing some research in the deviance of the definition. And so that will change. I foresee a future where that kind of comes together, and that's going to change the numbers.
Yeah, because there's no way genders can present exactly the same, because we're not exactly the same. We're not. So prevalence and placement, same thing. So again, if you look here at the statistics here, so about 10%, or 10th of a percent over versus 1% states to state. Interesting. Why is there such a difference?
Well, I would say and I wish California and New York were on here. In terms of early intervention, California and New York lead the way. And so you're going to get higher numbers when you have early intervention. I mean, that's just, if there's 10 people and they're all in California, you're going to have more people in California. Like that's just how it works. So I would say that the more universities that have education in those specific areas, the numbers are going to be higher. So that's what I would say. Your Midwestern towns with smaller populations, with the universities not there that are studying, then they're going to be numbered. They're going to be low.
Absolutely. Or think about what's culturally appropriate here. There's like a lot of research facilities here. There's a lot of
there's Mayo in Minnesota. There's absolutely.
And when there's like call out in the local paper that says, hey, if your child's acting like this, come on in for a study.
Right.
You're gonna have more public information. You're gonna have more bus posters. You're gonna have just part of the culture. And you might have kids who might have all the same symptoms, but they're working on a farm, so you don't really see the symptoms.
Correct. And you have less services going out to them. Right. And so the monies are not being taken, and your numbers are just less. Iowa has smaller cities than Minnesota. Minnesota has, a half a dozen big cities. So it's just in terms of numbers. I wouldn't imagine, I would have to do my research. I would imagine it's numbers.
Yeah. And obviously we're not looking, it's not a competition, right? It's not a race to be won, right? But again, if you look at autism in terms of all of what we're learning in this class here, LD always wins. LD always wins. Okay. Because again, remember we have a bunch of different subsets in LD, but it is really the largest now mind you, this whole pie is 10% of your public school population, right? So out of this whole pie, which is 10%, you can break it down into basically 3.9% is learning disabilities. Speech and language is pretty big. All other disabilities pretty big, but now we break down into, remember OHI has ADHD or ADD, and then the ASD is, that's, I mean, it's for its own category, where OHI has multiple things in one category.
Right.
Yeah, we have to share this zone right here, but this 9, you know, it's not the biggest, but it's there, you know,
Right.
it's one of the newer categories. So for it to
And
be,
I also think that this chart is talking about a school year, school age. If you were to look at early intervention, it would be higher than 9%.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
right, because early interventions has already identified.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Exactly. That's a great comparison. That'd be cool to have it.
Yeah.
side by
It's
side.
just it's a huge part. I mean, you know, Molly's talking about it. Cece's talking. I mean, it's a huge part of the people we're working with. It's growing.
And you know what, into Luisa's credit, a lot of times parents pull kids out and put them in charter schools because
Oh,
the school doesn't get my kid and I
Correct.
want a better education.
correct.
And yes, ideally charter schools can provide this really very, you know, choose your own adventure type situation based on staff faculty ratios and all that business.
Mhm.
But a lot of times you're going to see a retreat, especially because of COVID. Everybody had a retreat.
Mhm.
And so a lot of parents not putting their kids back in, right? Or keeping them home to homeschool, because for whatever reasons, parents sometimes are embarrassed. Parents are mad at the school, or parents, you know, or the kids is not getting along with the kids, or whatever. So you're going to see these moving around of kiddos who might fall through the cracks a little bit, who might be mild or just quirky, or so again, I have a friend who has 2 typicals, but her first one, Asperger's, and they went to, you know, they did the private school, they did modern day, they did the you know, the other schools, and they all ended up in 3 different schools. But the one with autism, and he's at Santa Ana College now, he ended up at a like a charter school in Santa Ana, and it was smaller, and they kind of got it. And he was one of the few with autism, but you know, high functioning, kind of quirky and peculiar, but academically really good. And he wasn't so peculiar that he had a bunch of, so he could fit into this more let's say a smaller group of students. Like when it was this massive student body, like at modern day, he's like, I'm out, you know, but it was a school of 150 kids, and between first and 12th grade, he could manage that. It was perfect. It was just finding the fit. And again, kids grow, kids change, but again, the challenges and the solutions are there. I always tell people, if you think this kid can never change, then that's on you. If you think this kid is just a diagnosis or a category or a label or whatever, or they're always going to be this way, no, that's on you. Maybe you need a break, you needed to walk away, you needed to have a conversation with yourself. But I like how the book does talk about that kids can be very successful.
Yes.
Which reminds me of my little friend Arden.
Just to go back really quick, they talked about PECS and ABA. I know everybody knows about ABA. Do you guys know about PECS? The picture exchange program, Louisa, do you know? So it's its own system. I have some examples. So like they're using a system where they take a picture off that shows you something that they want, and they hand it to you, and then you know what they want. So this is a big one. This would be a big picture exchange board. It could be as simple as like one of these, where well, that would be mine to them, or nice hand. So it's just a picture, and they hand it to you, which is reciprocity, and then you get to do what they want. So that's their language, and we call that PECS, picture exchange program. There's systems built on it, and we use them, guys. I use pictures. That's the one thing. Typically the children on the spectrum are visual.
Yes,
it's the best place to start. So pictures are great. I use pictures for songs. Every single child I've ever worked with loves music. So they tell you which song they want. I mean, this is a huge field guide. What is there? There's 16 on these. My 2-year-olds are picking which song they want in a field of 16. They'll pick it off. They'll hand it to me. We'll sing Old MacDonald. I understand. Sometimes they'll pick off Green Speckled Frog and I'll sing Old MacDonald and they will respond. And then I know that they know the opposite of what I'm supposed to do. And so now I know that they know negative. That's huge. That's a huge thing. They had something in mind and I didn't do it. That's communication. So the pictures are huge. You can use them in multiple ways. I use them for waiting. I use them for counting down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blast off. I mean, you can use these pictures in so many different ways.
Schedule. For
Potty schedule is right here. Simple for schedules. They start, they move it over. I'm done. This would have helped in your class, Molly, had the teacher had a schedule, you could follow her schedule and then that would be less disruptive to the kids. I use it for learning, airless learning, the pictures. So the pictures are great. The pecs are a huge resource. Huge.
But the same thing applies to the reciprocity from you. You could show them a picture of the backpack.
Mm-hmm.
Time to go get it. Right? It's time for snack. Right. So and again, really that's what language is. It's an exchange, right? So that's why they call it picture exchange communication system. And it's fantastic though. However, are you like, I'm sure you're super duper trained, but what about your people?
We send up to the PECS training.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's not just a bunch of pictures on a lamination machine. It's an actual,
no. The PECS program, like the exchange, the reciprocity. That being said, you can still use the pictures for almost anything. So like if you have a child that likes to elope and I'll give mom on her keychain, just a stop, like just a simple stop. So it's a visual of, stop. And then, or if you have somebody that needs to wait in line, I'll give them a picture of waiting for mom on her keychain. This is literally something I give to parents that they put on their
I have a waiting one at home.
Right. So, I mean, you just use them.
The 1 through 10 and it's like.
We just use them when we're walking. But the first thing when somebody would come in and when say hi, I would show them a visual and then they would say, hi, problem solved. You did it. We're done. I mean, that's as simple as it is. It's time to sit. So I'll put this on their desk. Time to sit. I mean, that's not PECS that I would call it for the picture, but it's certainly not the system of the back and forth, right. But it is a visual for a prompt.
Right, and it's this bridging to, and if you saw some of her images had the word on it too.
Right.
When they start saying sit, and you're like, right. Are they just an approximation of it? You're like, yes.
Right.
Start doing little like 3-letter words and favorite words, and you start just starting to scaffold it in and then it starts to blossom. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You gotta be patient because every kid's on a different,
absolutely.
One day they're doing all kinds of changes, like learning all kinds of words and doing all seamlessly. And the next day they lost everything. And you're like, okay. Right. Every day is different, it's fun because it's like, that they are getting those unwritten rules of language, which is reciprocity and sharing and going back and forth. And I have a request and you have a request. And what if you got it wrong or I got it wrong? And how do we manage those? I love it. No, I love it. I think it's fantastic. It helps. Any sort of functional communication that's the goal. Mm-hmm. To have a functional level of communication. And by the way, the PECS, then those pictures then can move into, and we'll talk about the assistive technology later, it can move into that piece too. There's
absolutely.
Like a nice little
that too.
With that too. Right. Mm-hmm. So again, some of the challenges are some of those flapping behaviors or some of the stereotypies can be self-injurious. I had this, you mentioned a ceiling fan before. I had a girl who would get aggressive. If she saw them, she would try to rip them off this, jump as far as she climbed to jump to rip it off the ceiling. Like it was the alien monster. Dangerous. It was, if we were anywhere with the ceiling fan, it was like we had to either not have in that room or you have restrict access. I mean, it was just all those things. Sometimes you'll see them hit their own head on the floor. And it's hard. I worked with a kid who detached his own retinas. He hit his head so many times on the floor. He detached his own retinas. It was eventually going to go blind.
So if you guys have kids like that, they need to be in serious behavior programs with serious behavior BCBAs
Supports.
that have that kind of training.
Yeah.
Those are few numbers. Those are, very few kids have that or dealing with that, but definitely go to the parent. Definitely, because health and safety, we've said that many times, first and foremost. So if a child is hurting themselves, we are so far behind. We have a lot of work to do. We need the cream of the crop specialists to get in there so that we stop hurting him. Like we've got to stop.
And if you, I included in the module, like some of the links to the videos, the one about Carly Fleischman. Did we talk about her? Or we shared her? She's a young person, a twin who has autism, and she was hitting her head. She was so severe. It was like, 40, 60 hours of work in the house. I mean, just so hard to work with, and so challenging, and she had no communication behaviors, and she was just trying to do one-to-one associations and pushing buttons and learning PECs. It was really challenging. And one day she sat in front of the laptop and started typing. And she was typing, and she typed like sick, and then went and threw up. So she, in like one instance, she basically, and I think she was like 13, like she went, I mean, her parents did everything, and they were like, just so many hours. And they said, now we realize that she knew exactly she knew how to communicate. We weren't asking correctly.
Correct.
And she's written a book. She has a talk show. Her first guest was Channing Tatum.
Oh, wow.
Where she like legit flirts with him using her iPad that speaks for her. She's still nonverbal, but she has an advocacy that she wants to talk. She wants to create advocacy and awareness for people like her. And again, she'll pre-program, or she'll type things in, and it speaks for her. She literally was like in her interview saying, so could you leave your wife for me? Because she's like flirting with him hard. And he was like, oh my God. But I mean, like, again, there was nothing holding this girl back. And so it was really cool that her parents were just like, oh my gosh. And we were talking about her in front of her. And we didn't say anything bad, but like we were discluding her from her own life, because we made the assumption that she couldn't communicate. We weren't asking. We didn't give her the right tools.
Yeah.
And she types with like one finger, but it's accurate. Yeah. And she'll say, like, sometimes I have to hit my head because, I mean, like she's like a Temple Grandin who can actually describe what's going on in her person, which is just invaluable, because it helps us, again, bridge that gap into that world, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So again, we talked about general challenges and characteristics, and then the solutions. I like talking about the solutions. ABA, PECs, UDL, again, Universal Design for Learning. You might see things like different ways to express. So if you have a child who's not verbal, can their iPad speak for them and tell you and do the presentation on Harriet Tubman? Yes, it can. Right. So there's things that we can do to create an educational environment for students, and they can still participate in their way. Right. Differentiated instruction. Again, you might have a student who's so visual, but is not good with, holding a pencil or things like this, but they'll type. So again, if you're presenting things in different ways and allowing for that differences of presentation and differences of, I just said it a second ago, multiple forms of representation and multiple forms of expression. Thank you. Accommodations, again, they might just need extra time or a quiet area, or to do certain things at home, or not to do certain things at home. Assistive technology, we'll talk about that. And then sometimes there's medical interventions. So again, like we talked about this, and so here for the TEACH program, this is kind of a program that came out of UCLA with Ivar Lovaas. Another program that just came out of UCLA is the Peers program that school is doing. It's about building friendship. It's not Lovaas.
My speaker's not working. Guys.
And then BCBA. Do you guys know what we mean when we say BCBA? Do you guys know what we mean when we say that?
No.
Maybe not. Let's define it. Professor Fernandez, would you like to?
Board certified behavior analysis.
Right.
So they're just trained to look at patterns of behavior and then analyze it And then you use things like ABA
You
and
just put this earphone on.
to modify it.
Right. So, but it is a master's level,
Mhm.
highly specialized. It's amazing. It's like, great. Printer, you have one here. It's your proposal.
I don't know it. She's amazing.
Yeah.
But yes, there are those 4 letters behind my name.
Right. And so, and that's so cool because I mean, I think it's a fantastic field to go in. It really just takes behavior as this massive human field, and you get down to the granular piece of how, what, where, when, and why, and what that could mean, and what it looks like. I have a VB map sitting right here.
Really?
I know, I have a VB map sitting right here.
Oh, how funny.
We get
Yes, yes. We use that book a lot. We use that
yeah,
book
I was going to ask you, I was like, which side of that?
Mhm.
Because here's a funny thing, because a lot of times in education, I think there is that old way of thinking of like, oh, behavior means that they're refusing. Yeah, it could
Oh,
be refusing, but a behavior could mean 1,000 times 1,000 more things than that.
I think that is what has changed the most in terms of autism. You always thought, you're going to do LOVAS, you're going to do your traditional, which was really punishment based. And then all of a sudden it's kind of just evolved into more of this humanistic approach. We have all these different, we use PECS, we use TEACH, we use ABA, we use verbal behavior, we use PTR, we use we use a bunch of different forms to affect the person, to replace functional behavior. And it didn't always used to be that way. And it got a really bad rap.
Yeah, and
rightly so.
Yeah, and I like how we can start to look at, like, I'm telling you, every time I even get a message from the school, well, X, Y, and Z, Peyton did this and that. I'm like, well, what happened before that?
Mhm.
I already asked the antecedent, well, what happened?
Right.
We had a blow up this week, and I said, well, what happened before that? They were having a golf tournament. They're having a golf tournament at the school because it's a nonprofit, and I know our college has a golf tournament, but this little school has go. But it's that's culturally appropriate for them. They're in South County. That's how they do it. His antecedent for his massive behavior was that other kids were getting on the bus to go to the golf tournament. Well, it was the transition students who were adults, the 18 plus students who were not on the college prep track. They were going to go help the event. They were also going to put up a booth of stuff that they made to sell to support their program. And so it was a fundraiser, right? So for all of us, we're like, yeah, golf tournament, fundraiser. My kid's like, well, I want to go. Nobody told me I couldn't go. You guys were talking about a golf tournament. I thought I got to play in the golf tournament. I was like, bro, it's like $1,000 for a force. Right? It's a golf tournament. I was like, I'm at work. Daddy's at work. No, I bought a bucket of balls. We're good. But I'm like, what happened? He was doing this and he was doing that and he was said this and he shoved, he did this with his fist. I was like, okay, what happened? What happened before that? Oh, and then his thing is nothing. Yeah, something happened. And then my favorite thing is when people say nothing happened before that.
Right, it came out of
Sarah
nowhere.
just hit the deck and she was kicking and screaming and having a big old fit.
Right.
And you're like, well, what happened right before that? Nothing.
Right.
Not to you, but to her, something.
Right. It's kind of like when Molly said that the teacher wasn't the same. Like
Right.
It took you a week to figure out what the antecedent was.
Yeah.
But you figured it out. Right. So now in the future, when teachers change,
right,
you could potentially have an off day. So what are tools to replace the teacher changing?
Yeah. So the ABC, if the antecedent behavior consequence, is huge. Are you all day, every day ABC?
All day, every day. I'm working in this language.
Yes, this is like she's like, I live here. I live here. But
Yes.
I'm telling you, and again, consequence. Kids don't know the word consequence. I mean, that's a developmentally appropriate word, but my kid, I still use the term natural and logical consequences with my child.
Mhm.
Like when you when you do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to get X, Y, and Z. That's how it works. Those are the things you put that in developmentally appropriate practice for little ones. Like, oh, I'm sorry if this is happening, we're not going to be able to join our friends outside, like things like that. So if you can get the child to understand, like, yeah, something happened and I'm having this reaction to it, that's okay, but we need to settle that, and then then we can move forward. Sometimes the ABCs create more ABCs.
All the time. And you're always just looking to replace that function. What is the function every single time?
Right. So you might even see it in neurotypical kids who are like, oh, the math test
All
is
the time.
oh yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Okay, kids, but it's math, it's math after recess, or you're like, when you come in from recess, we're gonna have our quiz, and then all of a sudden I have to go to the nurse's office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll see it. Same thing. Antecedents teacher said, hey, math quiz is coming in, a pop quiz. Oh, my stomach hurts.
Right.
Consequence, you still have to do the quiz, but now you're behind
Right.
and the whatnot. So there's ABC happens with all of us. ABC happens with every single one of us. Oh, and task analysis, that's a fun one.
Task analysis is this right here. Like if you have to go to potty, you break down how it is to go to the potty. A task analysis is just breaking something down to its smallest forms. So when they don't have it, then you know which part to start at and teach. Or if they have it, just making sure they get through each step.
Right. So like you might have a kid who can say, I need to go potty, but once
Mhm.
they get there, they see a toilet and pee their pants. You're like,
Correct. Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And you're like,
Exactly.
oh, okay, so you have the language and you told me that's excellent. How do we support that step so that
Right.
step doesn't, happen?
End up that way.
And
Exactly.
then the whole thing goes together as this one. And it's interesting. I think behaviorism also makes us adults really try to hyper figure out what we do just to, if I say I'm going to go get a glass of water, there's 12 steps between here.
We're
and there.
amazing creatures.
We are amazing creatures, but
We are.
there's a piece of this puzzle that it is inherent in the provider, I find, where some
Mhm.
people are like, no, just go get a glass of water. I'm like, you're not gonna, baby. Like you
Right.
have to be able to really operationalize like every little step
Right.
and
I
look
think
at
that
what.
that's
Yeah.
I think that those are good eyes in the world of autism. Like to just start. I think I had a professor that once said, special education is just regular education, but just finding it as its smallest form and blossoming.
Mhm.
So you're just looking at the middle of the onion instead of the outside of the onion. And then you might be pleasantly surprised that they're 4 layers out, or we're going to work on 4 layers out. So you're just starting to find the smallest variable. And that's
It
what
is,
you
you're
work
right.
with.
It's humanity on a granular level,
Mhm.
which I'm not saying that you have to love it, but it helps.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you love like really getting into humanity at a very basic level. This is for you.
Mhm.
Right. And same thing with teaching. Like if you really want your student to be successful, you get to know them well enough to say like, oh man, I know that this day might be a little challenging because whatever, it was raining or windy or whatever. I can tell you right now, what can we predict right now? Thanksgiving's coming up. The kids are going to be unscheduled. I get to bring mine to lecture on Monday and Tuesday because he has a week off and I don't. He's unscheduled. Like kids are unscheduled. The parents have like that. You're going to have parents who work and the kids are at home, and it's like you're going to see this. You're gonna
Mhm.
see behaviors. The holidays are coming up. There's more sugar. I mean, we just came
Mhm.
off of Halloween. There's lights. There's more events. There's more
Mhm.
stress. There's less sleep.
Mhm.
There's more
Mhm.
food. There's, you know,
The holidays are horrible.
people who smell different and sound different, and like
Everything.
it's like there's a lot of different things and over the holidays that really could unravel all of us.
Mhm.
So we can really just, I mean, honestly, the prediction is that there is no prediction, but
Mhm.
just just like beyond the lookout.
Right.
for-
Or the prediction is there's more meltdowns, and there are more meltdowns because they are over. They are over everything.
yeah. Also, the full moon cycle. I mean,
There's that
that's not in our book. But listen, my kid got suspended 5 times in the 2nd grade, and 4 of which were on a full moon. So there's data. There is a 80% significance to a full moon in my house.
Mm-hmm.
And 80%, and it is tomorrow. So we already got into argument about it. But I'm not saying that he's going to have a bad day, because he had a decent day today. He's like, no, Mom, the full moon is tonight. I was like, no, it's tomorrow. But in this window, we're just like, it's kind of situation. Mom, I said, okay, look up universal time and look at our time zone, and we'll talk about it in the morning. Right? Oh, I'm gonna miss the lunar eclipse. Yeah, you're not gonna make it. It's 1 a.m. No, it's not. It's tonight. It's tonight. Well, 1 a.m.'s tomorrow. Like we already got into the thing. I'm like, okay. Look it up on the internet. Talk about it over to Daddy. I'm going to work. So again, ABA, I have clips in here of what it actually looks like. Task analysis, again, is discrete trials means looking at one particular trial at a time, meaning like a try. right? If I said to a student and I said, like I had like two different, let's see, I had like colors just like this. And I was like, okay, which one matches? You know, maybe the command is just match. And if they do this, this is one trial, right? Even if they do this, this is one trial. Was this a successful trial? Yes, this is not a successful trial. And so sometimes we're looking at how many times a child can do that, how often they can do it, how can they do it the first time, how many times it takes to learn that trial, that certain thing. So how would you describe it, Professor Fernandez?
Just like that. You're just teaching to the smallest increment, and then you scaffold on top of that. Then you would teach for fluency, just like you said. You would teach for like IRT, like you say, like I have a candle, touch candle.
Right? Did they do it or not? Right.
And then they do it like 30 seconds later. There's a huge level. You can't be in a classroom where you say, get your pencil, and then 30 seconds later, here comes the pencil. So there's so many different things you would look at in terms of how that child would learn. And then you would trial it out. So if I would say, pick up pencil, I would take the baseline data to say it takes 30 seconds, and then I would decrease it to 2. And then I would do that over and over and over by saying, get pencil, and then prompt it to get the pencil, so that by the end of 100 trials, the child's got the pencil in a second.
And quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, it seems a little awkward and sterile sometimes in certain areas, but what you're doing is almost like, I call it like training wheels for like the neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost rote in a certain way, but once you lay down that neural pathway, they learn the word pick up, they learn pencil.
Right.
Next time you say pick up pen, you don't have to do that 30
Right.
seconds to the 2090. Like, so
Right.
You're building this foundation of learning. You're also creating the reciprocity of language. You're also doing the trust and connection. You're also modeling language, right? And that also is all piggybacked using positive reinforcement.
Right.
Now, again,
And it doesn't have to be something as dry as a pencil. Like you can do, a lot of people, when discrete trials has changed a lot, like you would take discrete trials and turn it maybe to pivotal response training, but you could do it for play. Like the car goes down, whoosh, whoosh. And so you're teaching sounds and through play. And you would just do those trials over and over again. It is really just imitation to learn.
And you just determine on those which trials you're going to do based on what the child needs to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's from the
and
data.
Always use a positive reinforcement. You don't get mad at them for when they do it wrong. What's your technique for glossing over the wrong response?
Ignore it, just extinguish or block as much as you can. Positive reinforcement is your tool. Whenever somebody says, what is behavior? I think behavior is positive reinforcement. It is antecedent, it is consequential, it is FBAs, but in the end, what you are using as your screwdriver, like your son, is positive reinforcement. So use it strongly. It is not as strong as punishment. Punishment is the strongest factor you will get. I often use the time, like if you're driving fast, the policeman doesn't, or let's say you're just driving, the policeman doesn't pull you over and say, good job keeping up the speed limit. Like that would be positive reinforcement. That's great. And you would feel really good. That's never going to happen. And it wouldn't last very long. You're driving over the speed limit. The cop pulls you over and you get a $300 ticket and you don't drive fast again. The punishment affected you for X amount of time. Punishment works. It works fast. It is simply not a tool in our box. It's not.
It's like that's not in our world. That happens. You're going to basically, it's almost a more natural place at home.
Within the family, the parents can absolutely use it. You would use it in appropriate ways. Like you could I do it with my children all the time. Like, thank you for putting your phone down, Alex, while the other child has the phone in her hand. She knows exactly what I'm doing. So, I mean, you would use it in different kinds of ways. Yes, a traditional punishment would be spanking. A traditional punishment would be those kinds of things that are thought of. Timeout is a punishment. And those aren't in our wheelhouse. So yeah, positive reinforcement is what you got. Use it.
It also really, really determines on the function of the behavior. If the kid
100%.
If the kid wants to work for a high five, that kid's going to work their tail off for a high five. Use that as a high five. If that's their thing, if they want that. but if their thing is, I really want to work for getting out of here, like I want to be done with this sucks, right? Then you're like, okay, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then you may exit, right? So you will, so again, it's really this really cool dance between what they need, how they learn it, how you respond, what you're measuring, it's this really cool piece. And I'm a big fan of ABA. It really is. It can get a little like minute and granular and very specific and nitpicky, but guess what? That's where the learning is. Yeah,
and
that's what the learning is.
The world of children has expanded that. For your child that wants to get out of town, and so he throws the cup across, and what do? You remove him. Guess what he's going to do next time? He's going to throw the cup.
I always joke about it. I'm like, who are they training? Are you right? Right.
So you're thinking you're punishing by removing, but in fact you're not. You are reinforcing, and that's the nature of autism. They change it as fast as you do. So you're just always looking at every single scenario. That's why it's hard. That's why what you guys are doing is so hard.
I don't know if you guys have seen it, but like on the internet, there's like the dogs who can press the buttons and talk. Mm-hmm. You haven't seen it? Oh my gosh, look up Bunny the dog. Okay. I have some at home, and I've taught my dog to use it. Like it just looks like a little press button, like you would have in a game or something. And it's literally for gaming. You can record your voice. And so,
no,
we don't have a dog door. So I have this little button, and I taught her.
Stop it. He says like, I have to go out or something.
Yeah,
like he pushes the button.
It's my voice. It says potty.
Oh, awesome.
Potty. And like, she'll hit it. And I mean, cause I would have a dog door.
That is AAC.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Then we also have another for Snuggle.
Oh.
We have, I think one of them for I think food or treat or something like that. So we just have 4. But there's a dog, and it's a childless couple, by the way, who has I think like 30. And it's very sophisticated. The lady wrote a book on it. Bunny the dog.
That's ABA.
Yeah, it's she ABA'd her and she's an SLP. She's a speech language pathologist. She ABA'd her dog into talking, and he even got to the point where it was like something about like out, like hurt, bunny, hurt, bunny, ow, hurt, bunny, stranger, ow. She's like, what is happening? He said, and then he came up and like put his paw on her, and he had like a thing in his paw.
This is like Up, like the dogs from Up.
Doug, we love Doug.
Oh my God.
You're my master.
Oh my gosh, that's
no. I look it up. She wrote a book, and I was like, Bunny the talking dog, and so yeah, I went out and got a couple buttons, and my dog, thank God, she's motivated, because there could be like, if you're teaching a similar skill to a child, which is very possible. I mean, you don't teach them to, right? But PECS is a very similar, like, this is what I want, give it to me, right?
It's the same thing.
So, right. So some kids they don't get it, or they only get a few of them, right? Or they get all of them and they skip off of PECS and they move on. But I was like, my dog is so motivated by a treat or a high five or like, trust me, the snuggle thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is really interesting, and it does help us because we don't have a dog door. So like, I don't want her to, be in the house. But there's different things that you can learn using ABA. It's not just for learning how to say something. It's learning how to do something, or increasing behaviors, decreasing behaviors, generalize. Like there's a lot.
We use it in sports. We use it in animals. We use it in business. You use it every time you turn on a computer program and they talk analytics. That's a big fat code word for ABA.
Uh-huh. Right.
Yeah.
In fact, our ABA, we had an ABA in the house a couple of years ago. It was 2019. And the supervisor, who was a math major, because of course I had to ask, he approached us and said, his data looks really different. Has anything happened in the last 3 weeks? And we're like, not that we know of. And as we dug down, yes, something happened at school, something big. And I even brought it up yesterday with Peyton when we were talking with this other therapist. I said, because he was kind of balking at analytics. And in fact, the Kaiser therapist she gave me a page of analytics, because before we see the therapist, we do like a little survey, and it's like, how are you feeling? And it's like things like, are you suicidal, and blah blah blah. But I mean, a full page of, and I don't know if you can see it, but I know it's kind of going in and out, but a full page of analytics. And he goes, that's boring, it's math, blah blah blah. I said, Mr. Mark came to me with data, and that's how we knew something happened to you, which now got him into another school. So
Mhm.
it's like this thing, like data doesn't lie.
No.
Data can uncover stuff that you don't even know is there. So it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
It's a great tool.
Yeah, so cool stuff. We're big fans of that, obviously, preaching to the choir. But again, in your classroom, you can make accommodations and modifications for students based on what they need, right? Again, are they overstimulated, or do they need a little bit more prodding? Do they need a buddy? Do they need the technology, right? So we say AAC, which is, that could mean something talking for them. So
Mhm.
technology is a huge part of this community. Did you want to?
Yeah, we use it a lot. So we use, there's programs like Proloquo, they use in the district a lot. We use Touch Chat in our program. I like the simple program ChoiceWorks, and it's basically PECs on a screen.
Yep.
And so the computer talks for you. So they'll hit it. They have to know how to manipulate multiple screens. Let me see if I have mine up.
Yeah, it's like the PECs on an iPad. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Proloquo. You can get really specific. You can change the voice on there, the accent.
Like this is a simple schedule that would be, so then you could outline the schedule, they move it over. All done. And then it speaks for you. So it says all done. The next one is all done. So it's just a simple device, simple program. All done.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. And so we use them all the time. I find I am more limited in AAC than the child is. The child can move faster than I can move. They're flipping the screens faster. Things are over. The thing on these iPads is things move so fast, and all of a sudden I'm in Netflix, and you're like, whoa, slow down, stay on the page. So I think that AAC people, it's almost like a specialty. I go to a speech therapist who helps me, who's taken a lot of AAC courses. It's a whole nother world. It's just another world, but it's a great
like
source.
Language. It's like another language. To me, it's almost like bridges the gap between what's already going on in their brain and what needs to come out of their mouth. And so, and again, I think that's just part of our evolution, that kids are just going to know technology that much quicker, and we have to catch up to them again, to their world. Yes.
And this thing for any person on the spectrum is like candy. An iPad, they know its power. And so that sometimes the AAC can cause problems there too, because then they just want to sit with the iPad and then they will only watch a movie. So there's a lot you have to be, it's a fine line. So you just have to walk it.
Not too little, not too much.
Right.
Because they want to work for, I had a kid who wanted to work for that Teletubby video, but then it would sit there and just like, dim out. And you're like, okay, now
they can self-satiate with the Teletubby video while you thought they were finding which page they were going to. Like it's hard. So you have to work through it. But all in all, especially if they are like cognitively age appropriate, it's a great tool. It's a great tool.
Fantastic. But I've had kids that I worked with who couldn't manage not even yes or no to choices on a screen.
Low tech. We would consider that low tech. Yeah.
They wouldn't even sit with a Teletubby video. There's nothing, this device meant nothing to them. Even yeah. So that was heartbreaking, because you're just like, oh, we have all these answers and tools and blah blah blah. And it does take a lot of like intelligence and desire and motivation to want to do these things. And but some kids aren't able to. And so there are limitations to everything, even though again, technology is fantastic. It can also work backwards. We just have to find something else. We just got to keep finding something else. Again, we've talked about earlier intervention. Again, stereotypy. Joint attention is getting them to look at what you're looking at, getting them to share that experience with you. Sometimes they are hyperfixated on the thing and not the person, but if you can balance that really nicely, how do you develop that? How do you like support kids who are
play? So you have a car and you drive it down a bridge or down a road. That's two things. You looking right now at me, and then the early warning signs of ASD is joint attention. You're looking at two things. So your play is the easiest way to do it. I would start where they start. They're spinning the wheels. So you get in there and you spin the wheel after them. And then they normally look at you like you've just killed their dog. And then they go spin again. And that's joint attention.
Right. And then you maybe just keep spinning, but you say, I'm just going to do it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Let's see if you can do it 3 times. So you bridge into their world, you do that thing and they're going to look at you funny. I love it. It's true. And then you try to make a game out of that thing. And then you can like pull it back and move it to
Right.
something else, maybe pressing a button or
shape it into something that's functional.
yeah,
for
it
them.
just
Right.
it's these slow methodical, and don't shoot so far ahead that they don't stay with you. That means that you have to kind of like back it down until they stay with you. That growth is together, because
Right.
you can't just say, okay, here's the book, read it, here's some text, go for it.
Right.
No, it really is learning humanity through being with humans. So again, a lot of really cool links in here. I'm pretty sure I also put these in the module. I like to back it up just in case, like maybe this one's not working, but that one is. But this example of the child not answering to his own name, I think it was like 28 times she calls his name.
Yeah.
He never looks up, not even once. So it's like, you're like,
And you can teach that, guys. You can absolutely teach that. You get in there and you can teach it. I promise you.
it's very doable. It's just, it was a mom saying, oh, this is what that looks like. I was like, yeah, and then you can work, right? So again, inside of an IEP, you might have a behavior intervention plan. Let me make that caps, a BIP. We call it a BIP. Again, sometimes we have to outline some extra support for a child if they're having, again, now is there BIPs in IFSPs?
If need be, like if the behaviors are SIBs, like if they're hurting themselves, yes.
Yeah, Peyton's he was a little bit of a rage junkie when he was little, and they were having to clear the classroom. Like a 40-pound 7-year-old was like, like that, because he didn't have the language or whatnot. And so the behavior plan was, well, we're going to be able to do some work out at the picnic tables, or walk the backstops, or get out some, or use, we use our words or whatever it was. But yeah, we had to put a lot of this into plan. And I think I still have a BIP in plan, but we've had to use it a lot less at a specialized school. So it kind of depends. So yeah, here's PECs. We kind of covered it as we were going.
Yeah, we hit it all.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So how are you guys hanging in there with all this stuff? I mean, we're throwing a lot of stuff at you. Teach is very specialized. We're not going to go down that road.
Teach is specialized for a classroom. It's a specific way of teaching. It's cubicles. They have pictures. They follow their.
This is an example right here for Alice. So like, it's not every school district has it. Not every school has it. It's really based on funding. So I wouldn't, don't get excited that it's going to show up. It might not, again.
And it's very specific to autism.
Very specific. And again, a lot of different, and colleges are kicking up right now. There's a program at Cal State Long Beach. A lot of students are matriculating again, depending on, the skills in our early intervention that was set forth, and people have learned their skills, and we've adapted into, adulthood. I'm telling you, my friend, she's got a 22-year-old who's taking graphic arts and choir at Santa Ana College. And while his 2 younger brothers now have their driver's license and a car, he's like, I'm not interested in that stuff. I have the access bus.
It's great.
I'm like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he was like, I want to be a DJ and write code. I was like, you know what? You could invent a DJ app. You write the code, you're going to make billions of dollars, man. He's like, yeah, I am. Fantastic. That's fantastic. And he's like awkward and, fun, but he's so pleasant. Like, he's like, hello, Mary Ann, I have not seen you in some time. And he'll like put his hand out to so it's like, it's a little bit, he's learned all the pieces, and it's a little bit awkward and rote, but it's so pleasant. It's so pleasant. And his mom's like, yeah, the other 2 are in the principal's office, and this guy's good. She's like, I can hang out with this guy all day. The other 2, just and so again, there's a lot of different stuff. And now that I see Peyton's school, and where they have students who like, oh, I want to go to college, and they start to matriculate them with IVC, and they're doing coding, and they're doing it, like taking accounting classes and ASL at his specialized school. Yeah, they teach.
So when you say like autism isn't new, that's so spot on. But what is new is this adaptation to what it is. So like universities and colleges supporting them in college programs, that is new. So that's the exciting part that we are seeing, that they don't just fall into the special education and then graduate at, 21 and then go into a jobs program. They are going to college. This is exciting.
Yeah, and trust me, I've taken Peyton to the open houses at Santa Ana. They have a full auto lab over there. They've got tech, all this stuff. I mean, like engines sitting in there and all this different stuff. I mean, they have a certificate in manufacturing technology. My
Mhm.
husband got that certificate and he works at Disneyland on the parade floats.
Mhm.
So yeah, my child could do that. The skills in which it takes to get that settled, it's going to take a while. He still, because of the ADHD, still can't really sit for a long amount of time. But if he could stand up and do stuff and move around and, have a guitar next to him or or have headphones with whatever, I mean, like, it's really interesting. Like, it's possible. It's very, very possible for kids to do and students to do what they need to do. I mean, once we find out what their, by the way, it's usually their splinter skill. The thing that they're the most successful at is their splinter skill. It's
Mhm.
not even a skill for it's just like natural for them,
Mhm.
right? The thing that you're absolutely best at in the world, what if somebody paid you to do that? That's the point. That's how we get people to participate in society. Again, a bunch of different just more information in here. You see me, I'm like hyperlink the bejesus out of this one. But again, we don't have to go too far back in the history, but we've talked about it. Here's Lobos, and again, we've come a long way, but we have a lot more way to go. And I do want to talk about this guy who said that vaccines cause autism. They do not. He lost his license and it was sued. So again, there's still people who believe it, but again, um, things like in science when we always heard about coffee stunts your growth, that is not true. Spinach has all this iron in it. The studies were done incorrectly on that too. Back in the Popeye days with spinach in a can, right? They said spinach had the equivalent of a paperclip. The decimal point was off. So yes, spinach does have a lot of iron in it, but it doesn't have a paperclip worth of iron in it. Same thing with the underarm deodorants that are causing Alzheimer's. There was an aluminum in the syringes that was not present, but it was present in the lab, but it wasn't present in the actual exposure of the item. So things like that is where people want to hang their hat on certain level of data. I can show you data that's exactly the opposite. So just anytime you hear something, research it, do your own due diligence. And I like how this book, because I had this book for 2 iterations of this book, and this was the first picture of this student, and then it showed him graduating back here. So it was, so it was very sweet to see him even evolve in between the 2 books. So it was really cool. And then this talks about, the sister's perspective. We talked about prevention. I don't, any sort of mutation is not prevent. I mean, listen, without mutations, we wouldn't have butterflies or dimples or polar bears or river otters, right? So again, I know people are there to figure out how to prevent ASD. I think we would have a better success as a society on how to work in tandem with ASD. And yes, go ahead and see if you can eradicate it, but how long have we been trying to eradicate cancer? So let's work at solutions instead of like trying to cut it off where it's still going to exist, right? Down syndrome is a blip too, right? We can't say, how do we prevent Down syndrome? It's a mutation. It's a blip. Can happen at any time to anyone. So again, prevention, I'm not a big fan of, but research, yes. And figuring out again how we can step into their world. That's the point. And then emerging research and things like that. You're always going to have people who are like, they've got to be gluten-free and they've got to be this. Trust me, I tried it. I did 18 months gluten-free and casein-free, and that kid never, not a blip changed, not his eating, not his sleeping, not his action, not his learning, nothing. We could do it again, but now I have a teenager. When I tell him, we could go sugar-free again. It's like the world is imploding. Telling a teenager with a dopamine deficiency he can't have sugar, he'd probably go ask the neighbor for a cup of sugar. I'm not kidding. Right? That's another thing. We were talking about kids. Cece was talking about how the boy was like, oh, I need to take a mask break. They will find a way to get their needs met. Right? We think that, oh, this kid just has autism, right? No, they'll figure a way to and what they're doing. I'm just going away from my mom. Oh, I need a mask break. You're like, I know what's up. Like, they can be pretty crafty, even if they're very not super verbal. They could have a lot of challenging behaviors, but they're observant. They learn a lot, and they'll show you. Yeah, don't ever underestimate Some more, yeah, we talked about the apps, Perloquo and whatnot. Again, those things mostly occur when needed. You have to get to that point. So again, the technology, it's great, but again, don't be too quick for the tech because sometimes it's hard to pry it out of their hands. But in the last year, just credits and copy. So we covered a lot.
And we've kept them. Oh gosh.
I know it's 9 o'clock. We normally only go to 8, but we started late. So well, let's keep it quick. And so we can answer some questions, but we kind of covered a lot. They're like, no, they're gone. No kidding.
Are you good? Everybody's good.
We can do thumbs up and just call it because yeah, it's late.
Oh, look, let me.
I like the thumbs up. Let's call it. Okay, well done, class. So great to see you. So great to talk about this. You guys do know that we're a resource here for you. Obviously, you have an expert. I'm a huge fan. So however we can answer questions or guide you or maybe point you in the right direction or support you in any way, this is a journey for you as well. So whew, a lot of stuff. We'll let you guys go. And then if you have questions later, just pop it in and see if you want to. Thanks for coming, Louisa. It was great to have.
Yeah, I'm so glad you made it. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we won't see you
Thank
next week,
you.
but have a
Yeah.
lovely, lovely Thanksgiving.
You
Of
too.
course, you too. Have a great week off or a day
wow.
off.
Mhm. Enjoy.
Take care.
Bye.
Perfect. So they're so
Hey, I saw what you were talking about. So last week,
I was like, we'll talk about it then.
last week we were supposed to do 2 and we only did 1. We only did ADHD. We never did emotional.
Yeah.
So we did a boo-boo. I did a boo-boo. I didn't catch it.
Oh, that's on me. I was like, oh,
Okay, so
I
we're
doubled in the middle. I don't normally do that, so that's on me.
okay. So are we gonna add that in to
Okay, so we have an option. We have an option here. Okay, so we don't want to skip anything, but okay, so what we could do is roll it out, and like literally put out an email and says like, oh, sorry, we were supposed to do blah 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 last week, and this was supposed to be this. So we could we could double up next week, meaning, how about you record one, I record one?
Okay.
Or
Okay.
we could double. We could always double up next week and make one of them like extra credit, meaning like that's what's like, why am I off week? So the gifted piece, which is kind of easy, we could do. So let's say next week we rolled out EBD and gifted, which kind of blows because it's like holiday week, right? We don't want to overload them. But if we gave literally gave them gifted gifts, meaning like if you do the notes and no discussion board, just we do one discussion board for EBD, maybe.
Okay.
And
No
then-
discussion board for gifted.
Right.
Oh, you already did that. You already had that. No discussion board.
Yeah, right. But at this point, or maybe we give them both discussion boards off. We do.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay.
We didn't mean to double. We were supposed to double up last week, but we're doubling up during the holiday week. But what we're going to do is we're going to take off the discussion boards. So it's just notes and reflection and quiz.
Okay. Just
Like
no
giving them a
reflection.
break. We're giving them like a mulligan on the hard.
Okay. But they also have chapter 3 due at the end of next week.
3.
Unit 3 exam.
But again, I'm not too worried about like due dates. Like I don't want to overwhelm them, but at the same time. So to me, the mainstay is the notes, the reflection, the quiz. That's the main, and then the exam. That's to me the main, like
Yeah.
the river flowing through it is like the hamster wheel, right?
Okay.
And then discussion boards do take a lot of time, but if we skipped an assignment and we're gonna put it in a discussion board, we could still make it an extra credit discussion board.
Okay. May I ask, what is a choice board? Because that's an assignment. I'm looking for it. I don't see it. Where is it?
No. So that was my version of
Because that's also next week.
I know. So. I'm eating well. Okay. Choice board was a way for them to choose the way that they would answer one of the SLOs.
Okay. Is that in assignment somewhere?
I don't remember anything at this point. I have like when you say choice board, I'm like, I have it. Did I put it in there? Did I do that? I didn't.
Okay.
But that's part of that's going to be part of their gift. We are not assigning a choice board.
Yeah, I think that
speak
we
to you
need
in
to take
another
that
way.
off. So let's take off choice board. They're going to have unit 3 exam.
Mhm.
They're going to have chapter 8, chapter 15. They're going to have to read both chapters, do the notes on both chapters, take the quiz on both chapters. And that's enough, right?
There's another option
Okay.
that this might be too much. I'm answering my own question. That we roll out stuff not early, but like there's like one pedagogical thought. It's like, should we let them have access to the last 3 weeks? Just
Well, because then after next week, which is doing 2 chapters, the following week they have 2 chapters too.
it's free.
Yeah. No, the following week is 2. It's 13, it's 12 and 13. And then the week after that is just 1, is 14.
And then let's do this. This might be terrible. We could always roll out 12, 13, 14 in the last week, but that's crazy. That's like stress city.
Well, I think we could just roll it all out. And then you guys have until when is chapters due? I think everything's due on December 13th.
Right, because then we could sidestep
Because some of them say that again.
You know, Jenny's always the one who's like, is it open? Is it ready? I'm like,
oh, and Jenny and somebody else told us that on the test or the quiz for this last chapter 9, they can't, chapter 10, it only lets them take it once.
CC.
Okay.
Jenny, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't CC you on the email. I apologize, but yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so they have the PSA, which what is that? And then they have
just like creating like a pamphlet or a fact sheet or whatever. That could be a discussion board, or we could make the PSA like the regular assignment, but make it. Wow, it was like 25 points, I think.
The PSA is. Let me go back into assignments.
I apologize. I'm not giving you I'm not modeling good.
No, not at all. I do have a question though. Okay, so I went to go look at the discussion board and it says in the syllabus that it's 10 points, but on the grading it's 15. I've just been giving them 15.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
I probably just messed it up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. Okay.
I think discussion board should be 15. Yeah.
Okay. So then we need to change that on the syllabus because it says 10 and the rubrics has it as 10.
Are you serious?
Uh-huh. Because I didn't like somebody's discussion board. And so I went to go look at the rubrics to see like what I wasn't jiving with. And then I was like, oh, there's only 10 total. And then I was like, oh no. And then I went and looked at all the discussion boards. They've all been 15, but in the rubrics, they're all 10.
You know what? Maybe it's because I changed it maybe last semester.
Okay.
But the reflection is 15, right?
The reflections are 15 too.
Yeah, so maybe that's why I just got confused in my own head.
Yeah.
That is not new.
Yeah, because it would, for you, that would make sense from a teacher like 5, 10, 15. I totally get that. But what we have is 5, 15, 15.
If you were doing it as 15, just keep it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, yeah, because that's the max on the grading. So it says like blank out of 15. Okay, and then we can just change the rubrics.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my God. I'm gonna write this down. I'm hilarious. Like, I swear, that's, you know, I have to say that is definitely part of the teaching process. Like, get it kind of laid out and you're like, oh, we're doing good. And then like you blippity blap here and blippity blap and then, oh, I forgot. Oh, like this is very difficult. Like, I don't want to say like it's not typical because
No.
every semester there's something they're like, oh man, I've got to do that, or we got to move that, or we got to do this. Yeah, and I touched base with Regina too. Me and Alex had something, and she's like, yeah, just let them know. It doesn't. She's like, it doesn't have to. If it's not measuring an SLO, it doesn't have to be in there. And how you measure an SLO is, and you can change anything, right? So if it's an assignment, it could be a discussion board. If it's a discussion board, it could be an assignment. So the point is that, okay, so on the first page of that, you have the syllabus out, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Just to interrupt really fast. Okay, so I went to look at the reflection. It's 15 points, but the rubrics has it at 5.
What? On my
Uh-huh.
reflections, I've never done it. That's a total. Really? God damn it.
I'm sorry.
But do you hear? I was only surprised for half a second. Do you see that? The rest of it is like utter incomplete acceptance. That is-
Sorry. Now go back and okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. I'm only surprised at myself for about a nanosecond, and then I'm like, yeah, typical. Typical.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I got the syllabus. I'm good.
So the SLOs.
Okay.
Let me ask you, how are we measuring those? I had a plan. I think that we're going to be on plan B.
Okay. How are we measuring them?
Well, read the first one to me, and I think I'll
I'm
tell
trying
you
to
the
find
answers.
it. Hold on.
Page
Okay,
1.
recognize various exceptionalities and conditions of children and identifying interventions based on developmental continuum.
Hmm,
That should be a discussion question,
okay.
like at the end. That could be
I
in
can
the
also- we can also put that as a,
question in the final.
it could be on the final. It could be a separate paper. I've done it before where I've like messed it up like this and just said, here's a paper and you can answer these 3 SLOs. We can absolutely do that.
Okay, let's see.
We can
Evaluate the
literally say we're cutting out the choice board and we're cutting out the PSA, and we're just assigning an essay right now, and you have 3 weeks to do it.
on 3 topics. That first one and the other 2. That's a great idea. I like that.
Okay.
This is the third one or the second one. Evaluate the role of history in society and shaping current policies related to best practices of inclusion and servicing children with special needs. I love that. Collaborate with families.
That was my choice board. I was like, you basically pick a medium of your choice and present that question, like a historical.
Okay. The last one says collaborate with families and community members in supporting inclusion of children with special needs. Maybe we could just ask them to give an example.
That was a PSA. That was the PSA. So we could do that as a discussion board. So we could,
Or just do your paper, like you said, like here's 3-point paper. Here's 3 paragraphs, right? Like just questions, answer the question.
yeah, I've done it to where it's like, here's the question. Like I said, this is the SLO. We have to measure that. It could be an essay. It could be in it. Yeah. It keeps it all in one piece. And so we could say choice board and the PSA, we're just putting it in a paper and we're rolling it out early so you guys can just tackle it now or not.
Love it. And then that way we know the SLOs are checked.
Right.
We've identified them. It gives them, it takes 2 things off of their plate, replaces it with 1, 3 paragraphs. Simple. And then the portfolio, which I love that you added that. I think that was great. I think we're good.
Okay, so yeah. Let me what I like to do is while I'm converting the video, then I work on this other business.
Okay. Do you want me to design? I mean, tell me what you want me to do. I'll do it.
Okay, what would help me is just looking ahead at the lectures and the exams and the quizzes.
Okay.
Like if they're, I know sometimes, like I said, there's like a blip and a blap, and then if you went down that rabbit hole, I'll do the other stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me specifically when you say
Okay.
looking at the lectures, like I go in and I already look at the PowerPoints. Now I'm looking at the whole thing. So I will continue to
The
do
PowerPoint,
that.
yeah, just keep doing that.
Okay. Look at the PowerPoint. Okay.
And then I think I may, because I'm thinking ahead. I think out of 12, 13, 14, I think there's one I did not do at all.
Okay, so then I'll do the PowerPoint that hasn't been done.
And then the quizzes for, what are we at? We're at 7. We're at 10, so 10, 15, 12, 13, 14. Because the exam,
Okay, and then you want me to look at all of the quizzes.
do they make
For-
sense? To you? Are they in the right format? Are they okay? Just like giving a little eyeball.
Okay, so look at the quizzes for 8, 15, 12, 13, and 14. Okay, and then what else? So okay,
Exam 3.
what do you look at the exam
Yeah,
3?
exam 3 and exam 4. Now, we can do one of the SLOs as an exam question. That's an exam essay.
Okay, but then we're taking off 2 assignments and we're just adding, I mean, it would reduce their workload. I mean, what do you think?
I'm factoring in 2 things. One is the stuff plus how we measure the stuff. Because our new SLO measuring system. Okay, so I'm gonna say, okay, yeah, okay, we're gonna put, yeah, plan BA. We're gonna put the 3 essays, the 3 SLO essays in one. So I'll write an announcement. I'll start it. We're gonna put the essays, the SLO choice board, and the
PSA.
yes, thank you, PSA, into a paper. Then we're going to, we forgot to do 2. Then we also looking. So here's the thing. We could wait for the rollout. So let's say the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I think we should roll out the last 2 weeks at the same time. Meaning we'll roll out 12, 13 like we would normally, but we'll also roll out 14 at the same time.
Yeah, I'm in agreement of rolling it all out.
But we
Yeah.
don't have to tell them that part until after, I would say, the holiday.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Let's not like tell them too much. It's gonna be like, hey, looking ahead, you know, we got off by week and got behind by a week. So what we're gonna do is we're combine these 2 into this.
Mhm.
It's here, and so you guys can work on it for the next 3 weeks. And then the chapter that we skipped over, we're gonna make it early Christmas presents. So we're behind by 8. We're supposed to do 15 next week, but we were supposed to do 8 last week.
Yeah, we're a chapter behind. So
Okay.
we have to combine them. We don't have a choice.
So 8 and 15, we're going to take out the discussion boards, and they're all only going to do the outlines, the reflection, and the quiz. I think that's going to help a lot. And I'm going to say this right now, as looking ahead for us, as we're measuring the SLO, I'm going to tell you right now, we're not and on purpose, not doing it in the most effective way. But I want to have that discussion with you when that time comes. Meaning, like if you put 3 skills in a trial and then you try to then report on each skill separately, you can't really do that.
Okay.
But I'm only doing that because we're new to it and we can get away with it right now. I'm not trying to get away with something, but what I'm saying is that when we later measure the success or the successful completion of the SLOs or the that's is all it is. It's like, did they satisfactorily answer these? We create that assessment. So the assessment could be all 3 in one. But then if you're giving them a number of points, how do you flesh out which is which? That's really what I'm saying. The actual assessment will say an essay answering all 3 SLOs.
That's why you wanted to separate it with a choice board and a PSA.
Do you see what I'm saying? I wanted to have 3 different assessments, but I have to tell you, because we're so new at it, I can trip on it at this point because I've already done it this semester. So I did the exact same thing with my first 8-week class. I'm like,
Well,
here's
then
this.
let me ask you a question then, if that's part of the goal. What if you've taken out the discussion board for next week? That leaves us 2 discussion boards left. What if we just took out the assignments and made 1 question a discussion board for week 11 and 1 question a discussion board for week 12?
We could take all the SLOs and put it in discussion boards. That might be, because like what I'm saying is like, I already effed it up this semester. I could either like just lean in and F it up or evolve it like in the same semester, which is in my bubble unheard of, but I'm willing to evolve this quickly. It hasn't been done before. Mutating as we speak. Because if we wanted to separate all 3, it crossed my mind for a second ago. You saw me calculating. It was like, well, we could assign 3 separate papers, but that's just like murder. Like, I don't want to tell the students they're only 2 pages each, but you have 3 papers to do. It sounds like a tidal wave, even if I said, answer this in 2 pages.
Well, what if we do that? What if we put in for discussion board on week 11 becomes the first SLO question? What if week 12 is the second SLO question? And then in the exam, we put the 3rd question.
We back up on ourselves on the exam too. How do you disaggregate an essay question out of a 50-point exam? Trust me.
They don't.
Yeah, it's one of those.
So we're letting 1 go then.
Or
We make 1 discussion board, like we keep in the discussion board for week 8 that we're combining with week 15, and we make that the question.
because here's another thing. If I put discussion board and it said extra credit, no one's going to do it. I mean,
No, because they've not done any of the extra credit. No.
Yeah, no, they're not gonna. That's the thing. It's like this weird thing. It's like we want to measure it and you want them to do it. But I can tell you, even writing it as an essay on an exam, a lot of people just don't do that essay on the exam.
Right.
They just, I'm not
No,
gonna
I
get 10
agree.
points, I'll take the hit.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another thing. We rebrand the final paper and call it course reflection. Course reflection 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
And that's how it's in 3 separate columns.
But then you're not doing 3 separate papers. So you're right. You're not
I could. I think if I rebrand it from a paper, which it is a paper, to a course reflection, which sounds a little bit more personal when we say like, describe the historical, blah, 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 like we say like, describe it and give us your, I don't know, we can make it formative, or you know what I'm saying? So I think, meaning like, I think they're used to the word reflection, right? So I think that's not a hard sell. But if we say course reflection, but I know a lot of these students are really good. So they're like, the ones who are like, we'll do it. You assign it, I'll do it. I just don't want to kill them in the process.
Right. That's why I think we have to take some of these assignments off for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They've already started the portfolio, so we're not taking that one off.
So the worst we're looking at either muddy data reporting, which is, I've already done it, but we don't need to do that, or we rebrand it so we don't have muddy. Yeah, I would definitely say more like the choice board's gone, the PSA is gone. Done. I'm just hesitating on shoving him into a discussion board because typically I think they're used to a discussion board that matches a chapter. It would be kind of out of left field. We're talking about
it doesn't dismatch the chapter. So like if we did it, let's say we did for emotional and behavior disorders, right? For chapter 8. Then what the first question is, recognize various exceptionalities and conditions of children and identifying interventions based upon developmental continuum. Well, identifying exceptionalities are the emotional kids. So that falls into that. Now, interventions are going to have to pull from their bank.
We could, in in the lecture for chapter 8, it talks about in the book talks about it. Who cares about Kelsey?
Oh, okay.
It's a documentary, but it's a full-on hour.
Yeah, that's
rough. However, it's a 19-year-old high school student who's like every one of your neighbors or whatever. Like it's a friend, or they like, oh, I see her. Like, and she's like irritated and depressed, and I'm terrible at math, but I want to be a, it's good, but at the same time, but what I'm saying is, like, if you watch this and then said, okay, what are the what is Kelsey's situation? What are her interventions?
Well, in your blue, you say that students will show their they'll show their learning through film analysis.
Maybe we're doing that. Maybe we're measuring that on film analysis.
I don't remember the questions on the film analysis. The role of history and society students will show their knowledge on a choice board. So that's why you do the choice board. For collaborating with family, students will create and present a public service announcement. That's why. Okay, well, if we already did the first one through the film analysis, we only have 2 left.
Okay.
I say they're the discussion boards.
Okay, so which ones do we have left?
We have evaluate the role of history and collaborate with families and community.
Okay, so we could do a 1 paper, 1 discussion board.
Yeah.
Okay, so interesting. So maybe okay, I'm looking at the chapter. Yeah, just when I think I had it all like figured out.
There's always hiccups.
Oh, always hiccups. But yeah, I was like, this is pretty much the same. Let's see. Okay, so film analysis. I'm gonna just like you see me that I'm like trying to put 2 and 2 brain cells together. It's fantastic. So I put I said, write a collegiate paper, minimum of 3 pages, which is, that's what we would have said, 2 or 3 maybe. Including the information you gathered above, which was like the questions were, how did you learn of this character's disability? What role did the disability play? How did the character with the disability thinks, talks, or feels about their own disability? So that's the part where it says like identify, right?
Okay, identify.
And then when it says what supports did the character require, that's the interventions. Yeah.
Okay.
Read the SLO again, please.
Recognize various exceptionalities and conditions of children and identify interventions based upon the developmental continuum.
Right. I think that knocks that one out.
Okay. So that one's done.
Okay, cool. So so we would, when we're in the SLO portal, we say like, this is what we did. We had an assignment. All we do say is like, it basically is a discrete assignment. Like, you're asking like, how did you measure that? It's a discrete assignment. You don't really have to describe it a whole lot. It was basically a paper, and that measured that. And then it literally, so again, even if we get hyper regimented on the data collection, I'm telling you, when it gets to the portal, there's this, I call it the political trapdoor, because for us, we get to determine if a 90% up is passing, is successful completion. Did they basically complete or not complete? Did they meet the guidelines?
Mm-hmm.
But we get to determine. We could even say a 60% is passing for us, which I call bullshit on.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I just go 70% and up. And again, they get a 70%, and they've passed. And so now your data set looks like pass, no pass, pass, no pass, no pass, no pass. And that's the graphs that they do. They go, your students in this class, in this section, in this semester, when measured SLO 1, 2, or 3, they passed. This many passed, this many didn't pass. But it doesn't disaggregate by this many passed by 80%. This many passed by 90%. Not like that really matters. Not that like that really matters, but it's like you get granular, and then it like,
they're just looking to objectify the subjective information.
Yeah. So that's kind of what that's what I mean by the political bullshit. It's like, oh, you kind of made it like it's almost like if all of your students got a 70%, you had 100% success.
Right. Welcome to the world of writing goals. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
you know, that's what I'm saying. So that's why you see where I'm struggling with like the bullshit data reporting to begin with, because it's gonna be like crammed into like a cubic zirconia at the end.
Mhm. So did they really or not? You're not gonna be able to prove on the data form,
But
but you did make them prove it. So if they wanted to actually have a permanent product, you could support it.
correct. I can go back to the data and say, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, and I have to tell you, like, I'm glad I'm going down the rabbit hole of this SLO, this new SLO reporting system, because I swear to you, my learning curve is a little bit slower, but once I learn it, I'm like, then I take off. So now I'm getting comfortable. So now, in fact, that you and Alex are onboarding as I'm learning it, and you guys are basically your first semester, you're going to have it like locked in. It's going to be a little bit harder to get the old dogs on board. No joke. So like I see the benefit and the cringe on it both sides, but yeah, that helps. So the film was identify. Okay, cool. Yay. So now we're looking at collaborating with families or whatever, and then the history. Collaborating with families could go on.
It could go under all of these.
History could go. To me, history is the most boring one. How do you? So to me, I guess I go back and forth. We could say there's one paper, and where you have to lay out the instead of saying the choice word, you don't have to do the choice word. You just have to write a paper on that answer. The history, barf. And it's weird because you want them to participate in it, which I think this class just might.
And that would just be in the discussion.
But what about the collaboration as a discussion?
I think so too. I would put them both in. I would
Okay,
just
so one goes for 8 and 15,
uh-huh.
and one goes for the 12, 13. Or we put the history one on 14 and unload it quicker.
Either way, I just think that you're killing two. You're right. It doesn't nicely succinct, but in autism, you threw in the person first language versus the individual first language. So, I mean, you kind of just threw in a cool curveball there, and they went with it. I think that they will
be responsive to the student.
Yes. Yeah. And you're learning in multiple forms, and you are the rigidity of sticking with the same chapter and you are moving the information around through chapters, which is fluid information retention. Okay, it's much better.
What if we did this? We gave them a discussion board break next week because it's a double chapter. Right. So give them a break. But then when it comes to 12, 13, it's the collab SLO.
Right.
As a discussion board. So we're asking them, how would you collaborate, or how would we?
You are asking them to collaborate with families and community members in supporting inclusion of children with special needs. Give an example of how you would collaborate with children and collaborate with families and community members in working with the deaf and hard of hearing community, or the low vision and blindness community. That's it.
Yep, that's got to be it. And by the way, they're both very community saturated groups.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then history. Ooh, now we're talking about.
And just sum it up in the last one. The discussion board is throughout the book. What have you found in the history? What have you found is the role of history and society in shaping the current policies that we have learned?
And have them just piggyback on each other. Oh,
yeah, as a bit of a summary.
Thank you for your wonderful brain and your nurturing ways.
No.
I'm like,
no, I think this is good. I think this is really, it's good learning. I think it just has them think outside of the box of autism, ADHD, vision. Like, they have to be fluid in their thinking.
Yeah, this is a lot. And by the way,